G'day, mate. Luke Ford here, and I'm taking your calls on any topic, not just the chosen topic. The chosen topic today is how to stop under-earning and earn what you deserve. But I'm taking your calls on any topic at 310-997-4596. So people are already coming into the chat room. Awesome. And I want to start off by talking about this great book by Gerald Mundis, Earn What You Deserve, How to Stop Under-Earning and Start Thriving. So some good stuff here. Business Week calls Gerald Mundis the godfather of under-earners. And this is effectively the unofficial guidebook to 12-step programs such as Debtors Anonymous, Under-Earners Anonymous, Financial Under-Earners Anonymous. Those are the three primary 12-step programs that deal with money. So let me just give you examples here so we can get specific. What are some examples of active under-earning? Seeking work for which you are not qualified, making unreasonable demands on an employer or client, spending time on projects or activities that will make little or no money, incurring heavy unnecessary expenses, botching a job, telling prospective clients or employers that you don't know how to do what they want to hire you for, behaving obnoxiously or offensively on the job or with clients, accepting work you know will pay you less than you need, making promises you can't fulfill, exhausting yourself during non-working hours, investing more time on a job than you're being paid for. So those are examples of passive under-earning. CNBC, the Money Club, did a story on Gerald Mundis and his book, Earn What You Deserve. Let me just play this excerpt.
Money worries. It seems we all do of some sort or another. The trouble is often figuring out how we get stuck in that black hole. So if you feel like you're spinning your financial wheels and can't quite find out why, here's one reason you probably haven't considered. The Money Club's Susan Lisovich has details.
When it comes to problems with money, most people seem to run into trouble by overspending. But if author and recovered debtor Jerry Mundis has it right, your problems may also have a lot to do with something he calls under-earning.
Under-earning is repeatedly to bring in less money than you need, usually for no apparent reason and despite your desire and even efforts to do otherwise.
In his new book, Earn What You Deserve, Mundis points out that under-earning is not underachieving, being lazy, or refusing to work, and it is not about being underemployed.
On the contrary, under-earners are frequently very hard workers and often even overachievers. They simply make sure in some fashion or another that they don't get paid very well for the work that they do.
Sounds strange, but true? Could you possibly be an under-earner? Well, here are some questions to ask yourself. Are you usually in debt, have little savings, few assets? Do you have only a vague idea of what your expenses are? Do you feel pain, fear, stress over the subject of money? Under-earners are frequently guilty of setting low fees, turning down work, not asking for raises, and investing more time on a job than they're being paid to invest. But why would someone do this? What are the reasons why someone would say no to money?
Usually it's a series of distorted attitudes and perceptions about self, about money, and about self in relationship to money. Attitudes and beliefs such as, I don't understand money, I'm not qualified for that kind of thing. Good people can't have money because money corrupts. And so for a variety of generally slightly hidden reasons within the psyche, we evade and deflect and avoid bringing more money into our lives.
Directing this educational workshop, performer, acting coach, and storyteller Karen DeMoro is beaming here. But she has experienced the pain that comes with under-earning.
I was so worried all the time about money that I started to just lose it. In fact, at one point it was so bad that it was a choice between a subway ride or lunch. And it struck me that anyone who was working as much as I did was doing something wrong.
Just recognizing that her problems came from under-earning was Karen's first step in recovering. She reached out for help. stopped taking on jobs that didn't provide her with enough income, raised fees, and sought out the information she needed to expand her business. In 2 years, she more than doubled her income by following some rules that were both financial and spiritual.
And don't use credit cards. And have clarity about where I'm spending. And then have an idea of what I wanted to do in my life. And what that took money-wise.
Along with not incurring any more unsecured debt and keeping a spending record, Mundus recommends the 25% solution.
Sell a skill that you have, an ability you possess, either from your job, your occupation, or as a hobby. Find a way to market that for 4 hours a month, but make sure that you are paid at least 25% more per hour for those 4 hours than you normally make at your regular job or occupation.
With this, you will experience the basic idea of earning what you deserve. It's not about working harder.
On the contrary, the hope and the ideal situation is that as one overcomes under-earning, one is bringing in more money for actually less effort and able to live a much more relaxed and humane style of life.
Overcoming under-earning has been a great adventure for Karen DeMoro. Out of debt and prospering, she has changed her relationship with money.
The biggest change is I have freedom inside my own head, so I can pay attention to things I care about instead of worrying.
Good for you. For the Money Club, I'm Susan Lasovich.
Okay, so I used to have the credit score of a basketball American. Between most of my life, I've had good credit scores, excellent credit scores. But when I went back to school to study the Alexander technique, I maxed out my credit cards. They were up to about 52,000, essentially between 2011 and 2015. And I had a credit score that hovered around 600 during those years. And now I have a usury American credit score of 819. And took a couple of years working 40 to 60 hours a week, managed to pay off all that credit card debt. I will give myself credit. It never occurred to me to declare bankruptcy. Like everyone else was telling me, you need to declare bankruptcy. And then people also tell, you need to call your credit card companies and, bargain them down. That didn't occur to me. I had incurred the debt. I knew I was going to pay it off. And I just needed a little help. I needed a 12-step program. I needed community, friends, guidance, inspiration, energy. And I found those things through going to 12-step programs related to money, related to relationships. See, if you're a food addict, that's going to affect your debting and your under-earning. If you're a sex addict, that's going to affect your debting and your under-earning. If you don't know how to get along with people, that's going to affect your earning. Basically, everything good that happens to us happens through our relationships with other people. Okay, so let me read a little bit more from this excellent Gerald Mundus book. Now let's talk about passive under-earning. Ignoring or blinding yourself to an opportunity, failing to request a raise, not knowing what your expenses are, not attempting something unless you're positive it will work, failing to fulfill responsibilities, not increasing your fees, not making sales calls, waiting for something to happen that will make things better, not capitalizing on skills or abilities, failing to wonder if there's anything you could do to make more money, not drawing up a personal or business career plan, feeling that everything results from fate, that there's nothing you can do to change it, and failing truly to test that belief. So I'm taking calls. If anyone wants to call in on any topic, 310-997-4596. That's 310-997-4596. Meanwhile, I want to play some more on this topic. I want to play something from a coach and a philosopher named Jim Roy. Really like what he has to say. And he has a website at jimroy.com. That's JIMROI. So here he is talking about
this, and it occurs as kind of the subject we don't want to even entertain talking about as it pertains to us, possibly. So why is it something that you think is something we should be talking about?
Yeah. Well, if I just put it in terms of hitting the nail on the head, I would say this is the conversation. This conversation has a great future, even though it's hardly begun, because the things we cannot talk about are the things that kill us, that we're most blinded to. And our inability to speak openly with ourselves, even with our relationships, our spouses, forget with our accountants and our, tax, this is, as you said, probably the most taboo and probably a conversation that conceals more human pain and suffering than any other. So, and you picked up on my passion for it, which anyone might guess is that deals with things in any way like this. I have a personal investment. So I just want to say to the viewers, you may not be able to hear this at all. And you may be able to hear this like, well, maybe it'll be interesting. And I just want to say, if this might seem to have nothing to do with you, but like you might be kind of interested, that's a fine way to listen, because any way we can begin to enter this conversation is going to be beneficial.
So I'm going to interrupt you just for a second, because I agree with you, but why is it a subject we need to talk about? Like, I understand that.
So that's Jim Roy there talking on some public access show about compulsive underearning. So getting back to the book, Earn What You Deserve by Gerald Mundis, he gives a great example of his own underearning. And he says, I wrote most of my books under pseudonyms. Whenever one of those pseudonyms became famous and built a loyal readership, I killed that name and began writing under a new one. I had conscious reasons for doing this, an elitist attitude about the difference between art and commerce, the idea that readers want a writer to produce the same kind of book each time, that publishers want an exclusive on a writer and don't want him writing for other houses. There are other reasons too, and some truth in all of them, but the real truth, though I didn't know it then, was that changing names was a near perfect function of my compulsion to under-earn. It is difficult, even in the best of circumstances, to establish a reputation and make a living as a writer. I put myself through the additional trial of having to do it 3 separate times under 3 different names. So, classic example of under-earning there. Let's go back to Jim Roy.
But people sort of manage in their lives, and they manage without divulging this very personal information. So what is there that's important to listen to?
Yeah. And first of all, I wouldn't say anyone needs to divulge any of this especially not with anyone that wouldn't understand. So this is a great kind of maybe a tightly held conversation. This isn't let's go public or something. It's a little like very much on the model of the alcoholics. They created an anonymous program because people couldn't understand them anyways. They could hardly understand themselves. So especially initially, and it's proven to have immense essential benefit, that you don't have to talk openly, but that you can find someone to talk with, that you can at least begin to talk with yourself, and begin to examine, because the only reason anyone's going to take this on is because they're suffering immensely. I don't expect anyone's going to take this on out of simple curiosity or anything of the sort. People are going to take this on because they're suffering. And I'm convinced there's a huge audience for this. As I've been able to deal with my own issues, people have started coming out of the woodwork. People are dying to talk about this, but they don't want to be laughed at. They don't want to be judged. They don't want to be riveted. What does that mean? And I don't want to say it because I don't want to make it true. All of these, things that we all fear. So I just want to say, look, I'll go first. In fact, I'll tell, my story a little. I mean, I discovered this. I grew up very poor. A family of 9 kids up on the coast of Maine, and my father had no education. And we were poor, and there was a lot of insanity about money kind of profound insanity. You know, my father used to take my money and, you know, he said when I was old enough to have my own bank account, we'd put it in the bank. I mean, he was an alcoholic and the money never ended up in the bank and we didn't talk about it, you know. So, like, I come by my passion very honestly, but I thought when I left home, I grew up in the 60s, and, you know, when I left home when I was 17, I thought I left it behind, and I had a lot of evidence for that because I had no money issues for the, you know, until.
So explain that. When you say I had no money issues,
yeah,
did it mean you were earning a lot? You were comfortable?
Not a lot, not a little. I always had enough money. So I left home. I was a hippie. Didn't need a lot of money. I got through being a hippie. You know, I always was good at working and taking care of myself. You know, I worked my way through school. I saved up the money to go to graduate school. I was actually very successful. And then I met the woman who would become my wife. And nothing was very certain at first, but I began being anxious about money and nervous and didn't exactly want to talk about it. And we kind of struggled.
Okay, that's Jim Roy. So, right, this is a topic that's more personal and more uncomfortable to people than sex. Like, if I asked you to describe your sex life, you'd probably feel quite comfortable. You might feel more comfortable doing that than if I asked you to talk about your financial life. So, what are some characteristics of under-earners? One is you are in debt. All right, unsecured debt. Maybe tens of thousands of dollars like I was. That's classic symptom of under-earning. Two, under-earners tend to have very little savings and few assets. Under-earners are frequently in financial crisis. Under-earners constantly feel pain, stress, and fear over money. Wow, only one person in here is written out how much money they make annually. Why? Why are you guys so scared to write out how much money you make annually? I make about $70,000 a year. In 2016, I made a little over 85,000, close to 90,000. But I cut back on some higher paying work to do more YouTube live streams. Under earners tend to do a lot of unpaid work. They volunteer. They do a lot of charity work, showcase work. Doesn't pay off. Under earners often come from alcoholic or otherwise troubled families. Under earners tend to resent people with money. Under earners are good at finding people who enable their under earning. So under earners only have a vague idea of what their expenses are. Under earners tend to suffer from exhaustion. They overwork, get tired, cease work completely. They're often workaholics, or they work in cycles of excess and collapse, or they just don't want to work at all. They're just too discouraged. Under earners see the gross, not the net. Okay, the difference between the gross and the net can be enormous. Under earners may think there is spiritual or political virtue in not having money. And under earners are proud of their ability to make do with little. What do I do outside of YouTube? I write for people, businessmen, etc., who need websites written or brochures written, things like that. And I also teach Alexander technique. So I write a lot for people in business. Okay, under earners believe their occupation won't allow them to make more money. And under earners tend to have clothes and other possessions that are old, worn out, insufficient. Under earners tend to feel that eventually something will happen to make things better. Someone will come along to rescue them. Usually the under earner is waiting for, wishing for, depending on, or planning for the big fix. The big fix will enable him to pay off all his debt and have a lot left over He's going to get a raise. He's going to make a big sale. He's going to get a gift from his grandparents. He's going to pick up a big bonus. He's going to make a killing in the stock market. He's going to sell his stamp collection. He's going to receive an inheritance. He's going to graduate and go to work. He's going to sell the movie rights. He's going to win an insurance case. He's going to land an oil well. Under-earners fill their free time with endless little tasks and chores. That one weird trick. Under-earners fear spending money and feel resentful when they must. They sometimes go on buying binges. So one of the tools I remember from Debtors Anonymous is that if you're going to spend over $250, that you call someone in the program. Under-earners believe money would cure all their problems. So just a few characteristics, okay, to review. Under-earners are usually in debt. They have little savings, few assets. They're often in financial crisis. They feel pain, stress, worry, fear over money. They do a lot of unpaid work, such as volunteer, charity, showcase work. They often come from alcoholic or otherwise troubled families. Under-earners tend to resent people with money. Under-earners are good at finding enablers. Under-earners usually only have a vague idea of what their expenses are. Under-earners are workaholic or work in cycles of excess and collapse or don't want to work at all. Under-earners see the gross, not the net. Under-earners may think there is a spiritual or political virtue in not having money. Under-earners are proud of their ability to make do with little. Under-earners believe their occupation won't allow them to make more money. Under-earners often have clothes or other possessions that are old, worn out, or insufficient. Under-earners feel that eventually something will happen to make things better, that rescue will come from above. Under-earners fill their free time with endless little tasks and chores. Under-earners fear spending money, feel resentful when they must, and then occasionally they go on these massive buying binges. Under-earners believe money will cure all their problems. Just a few of the characteristics of the under-earner. Let me go back to...
For a while, I'd say, we used to do all kinds of things that we didn't even realize. Like I used to spend money without telling her. She used to save money without telling me.
Sounds like a good match.
Yeah, we sort of like cancel each other out. So we might have gotten by for a long time until she got pregnant, and with our first child. And when she became pregnant, I became frozen. And
say more about that. What does that mean? When she became pregnant, you became frozen.
Well, so the obvious thing. I mean, I loved her. I wanted to be a father. We knew we were in love and wanted to have a family. We'd been trying for a long time to have a family. So it was a triumph that she got pregnant. But what happened for me when I say I got frozen is I stopped doing anything that would lead to money. And I mean, it wasn't that difficult. What I had to do, I was a consultant living in Manhattan. I worked for myself. I just needed to pick up the phone and dial some numbers.
Now, so you were already making money and you were already managing.
Mm-hmm.
And
so under-earning has to usually do with how you spend your time. It's a disease of hiding, where you're hiding your true talents, that when you start to work on your vision, the energy cuts off. So you might have an idea, I want to do a podcast. And so you research how to do a podcast, you look at equipment, you write down some notes, but you never actually start doing the podcast. Or you have the desire to write a book and you start on it, but then the energy cuts off. You think, I should do some stand-up comedy. But whenever it comes time to go to your class, your stand-up comedy class, then suddenly you get like symptoms like a cold is coming on. So you stay home, skip the class. You get an idea that you want to learn about photography. And so you buy some books on photography, but you never read them. So that's a classic under-earner symptom, that the energy cuts off when it comes time to living out your vision. So under-earning tends to be a disease of hiding. You're not willing to come out, be positively, publicly visible at something that you're good at, that you care about. And debting tends to be a disease of vagueness. You're not clear. So one of the ways that I counteract these things is that I track my time. I use a tracker. And so I track my time, I track my spending, I track my earning, Every day I check my bank account. I use one credit card, and pretty much every day I check the balance. I know that there was one time when someone did some kind of scam on my bank account and took out like $700. So I had to close the account, but the bank reimbursed me. And occasionally there might be some fraudulent credit card charge, but because I'm checking my credit card every day, I'm right on top of it, and I'm able to dispute it. So that's improved my life. Here are some symptoms of under-earning from the 12-step program, Debtors Anonymous. Time indifference. We put off what must be done, do not use our time to support our own vision and to further our own goals. So most of my life, I've had a vision, varying visions for what I want to do. And so when I've had a vision, then I've used my time to pursue my vision. But much of the time, that vision was not rooted in reality. So even though I was diligently working towards my vision, it was not a financially viable vision. When I didn't have a vision, I just sit around and read books, and I wasn't working on things that would make me money. 2, idea deflection. We compulsively reject ideas that could expand our lives or careers and increase our profitability. So the more insecure we feel, the less likely we are to be able to hear other people's ideas. Like the more neurotic we are, the more regimented we need our life to be. So I've had friends who pointed out I'm not very flexible. I think I've dealt with the chaos from my childhood or my own inner chaos by being very rigid. And if you're going to have people in your life, you have to be flexible. It's hard to be rich without having people in your life. Compulsive need to prove. Boy, this is a big one for me. Although we've demonstrated competence in our jobs or business, we are driven by a need to reprove our worth and value. Always wanted to show people how smart I am, how successful I could be, that they were wrong about me. And there are various people that I wanted to prove things to. I've had a problem with making other people my higher power. It's like, oh, if I could only be friends with this person, if I could only have this person's respect, if we could only be compadres, if only we could be peers, then it would show that I've raised my life to a higher level. Clinging to useless possessions. We hold on to possessions that no longer serve our needs, such as threadbare clothing or broken appliances. Yeah, I've like hung on to t-shirts for 20 years plus. 5, exhaustion. We habitually overwork, become exhausted, then underwork or cease work completely. So prior to getting chronic fatigue syndrome in February of 1988, I was working about 30 hours a week and taking 24 units at college. And then I just cracked and spent most of the next 6 years in bed. 6, giving away our time. We compulsively volunteer for various causes or give away our services without charge when there is no clear benefit. 7, undervaluing and underpricing. We undervalue our abilities and services and fear asking for increases in compensation or for what the market will bear. That's me. Never in my life have I asked for a raise, and there have been countless times when offered better money, or I've said, I'm not worthy. I don't deserve that. Ugh. 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 I just wasn't prepared to accept more money. I just like had these psychological shields up against prosperity. 8, isolation. We choose to work alone when it might serve us much better to have co-workers, associates, or employees. Certainly something I've been prone to. 9, physical ailments. Sometimes out of fear of being larger or exposed, we experience physical ailments. So I've struggled with energy levels over the past 30 years. And I find that the more connected I feel with other people, with other good people, people I want to feel connected to, the more energy I have, and the more isolated I feel, then the less energy I have. 10, misplaced guilt or shame. We feel uneasy when asking for or being given what we need or what we are owed. So this has kind of haunted me all of my life. That's why I've never been able to ask for a raise. 11, not following up. We do not follow up on opportunities, leads, or jobs that could be profitable. We begin many projects and tasks, but often do not complete them. Yeah, I've had people give me good ideas and try to point me in a good direction, and I just was not able to follow through. And stability boredom, we create unnecessary conflict with coworkers, supervisors, and clients, generating problems that result in financial distress. This may shock you, but I've been a bit of a drama queen in my life, looking for excitement. And Alexander says, can people tell when you have autism that you're somehow on a different wavelength than everyone else on the room? Yeah, I think people can tell. And the chat suggests that we started a new religion. Think about the tax deduction. Neurotypical advice doesn't work for the neurodivergent, and neurodivergent advice doesn't work for neurotypical, says the chat. Okay, so let's listen to a little bit more from philosopher Jim Roy here, talking to some life coach named Natasha on compulsive underearning.
Life was working, and now your wife is pregnant. Now, this seems to be like a pivotal moment. Mm-hmm. So did you stop working the way you had been working, not move forward, or just suddenly get frozen and become somewhat immobilized financially?
I suddenly became frozen, and I would look at the telephone and I would think of all the things I could do and should do and knew to do and knew they would work. And I didn't do them. And I mean that. It's like, if you hear what I'm saying, it's kind of like confessing a sort of insanity. Though I've discovered since then, I'm not exactly unique about this, but then I'll present mine here. I'd look at the telephone. I knew, so here's one of the things you can hear in what I'm saying. It was not an intellectual issue. It's not that I didn't know what to do.
Right.
And it wasn't a physical issue, like I couldn't do it. What's not to do about dialing numbers? So something much deeper was engaged here. And I'll kind of just put it forth now. Looking back, I can say, yeah, it was my own profound, deep belief system that providing for a family is a burden and a struggle for the man. So I was having a family, so it was time to struggle with the burden. And I did everything perfectly from that perspective.
Struggling, you mean?
Yeah, we say you always win the game you're playing. So if I was playing the game...
Wow, what an insight. You always win the game you're playing. So I asked the chat, what game are you playing? And what does it feel like to win that game? You always win the game you're playing. Oh, there's just so much in that statement to unpack, to apply, to think about, to meditate, because we tend to fulfill our own prophecies. If our prophecy is that people will betray us, they will betray us. If we have the philosophy that people can't be trusted, then that will happen. If we have the philosophy that no matter what we try, we're doomed to failure, we're going to win that game as well. We always win the game we're playing. All right, so let's go back to those symptoms of underearning. So let's look at the tools of Underearners Anonymous. All these tools counteract the symptoms we just discussed. 1, time recording. Must be conscious of how we spend our time. We keep a written record to increase awareness and to support our focus on goals and the actions required to achieve them. 2, meetings. We attend underearners meetings regularly to share our experience, strength, and hope to help ourselves and others recover from underearning. 3, sponsorship. We actively seek sponsorship with someone who's worked the 12 steps and is willing to guide us in our recovery. 4, possession consciousness. We routinely discard what no longer serves us to foster a belief that life is plentiful and that we will be able to provide ourselves with what we need. 5, service. Giving service is vital to our recovery. It is through service to others and to the fellowship that we keep what has been so generously given to us. Goals pages. We set goals for all aspects of our lives, write them down, measure our progress, and reward achievement. 7, action meetings. We organize action meetings with other underearners to discuss our earning concerns and to generate actions that will bring more prosperity into our lives. 8, Action Partner. We connect regularly, daily, with action partners regarding earning concerns to provide each other with accountability, continuity, and support. Solvency, we do not debt, one day at a time. Debting leads to under-earning. 10, Communication, we contact other UA members to seek support, to diminish isolation, and to reinforce our commitments to action. 11, Literature, we read UA literature to strengthen our understanding of compulsive disease and the process of recovery. 12, Savings, saving money demonstrates faith in the future and acceptance of the fact that money is a tool vital to our prosperous vision. We create and follow a savings plan on whatever scale we are able. Back to philosopher Jim Roy. He's talked about in this great Gerald Mundis book, Earn What You Deserve, How to Stop Under-Earning and Start Thriving.
Aim of struggling with the burden of providing for family, which I'd seen my father do, and my wife had seen her father do, so it didn't seem strange to either of us. Except it was clearly not going to work because my struggle was, I was totally ineffective. So I had to start looking deeper than what do I know and deeper than what can I do, and look into, happily for me, I'm a philosopher. So I could look at who am I being here? Who am I being? And, since I'd been working with models of how do human beings generate their life? Well, they believe stuff, and to believe stuff is like when we say we have a will. Our will is really our ability to care about stuff. And truth is, we care about strange things. So if I say I was willing to believe that providing for a family was going to be a burden and a struggle for me, and it was horrible, and I was so ashamed and so afraid, and I couldn't tell anyone, I couldn't talk to anyone. My wife and I kind of grappled with it, and I finally started using a 12-step program so that I could talk about it.
So this was a 12-step program specifically designed around financial issues, or?
Yes, it's financial issues. I'm not going to just say which program it is because it's an anonymous program. But, there was no program for compulsive under-earners in those days. It was almost like a plight worse than death, worse than being out. Nobody wanted to be that.
So, you're someone who had a lot of insight. And as you say, you're always in a philosophical inquiry and being trained. So you see yourself frozen. A baby is imminent. A family is imminent.
A belly's getting bigger.
Right. And
okay, that's philosopher Jim Roy. So I want to read from the New York Times. Jim Roy, JIMROI.com. He is a philosopher. So I want to read from the New York Times, January 5, 1986, New York Times Sunday Magazine, an article by Gerald Mundis. This led to his book on how to get out of debt. It's an excellent book. It's a Friday night in November. Some 50 people are sitting in molded plastic chairs in a one-room brick building that is part of a church complex in Greenwich Village. It's a comfortable, sparsely furnished room used by various community groups. 2 ceiling fans turn slowly. The group is listening to a woman talk about her life and about her money. She's in her 50s, a commercial artist. She wears a tailored skirt and a long-sleeved beige blouse. Her name is Ruth B., and she's participating in a meeting of Debtors Anonymous. My family was extremely money-oriented, she says. I grew up thinking it was the paramount value. I was in awe of wealth. I always tried to give the impression that I had money and to live up to the level of my affluent friends. Her audience is about evenly divided between men and women from the mid-20s through the mid-60s, dressed in everything from jeans and sneakers to expensive ensembles and business suits. Most pay close attention to her. Some are distracted by matters they want to bring up later. Ruth describes a life in which there was never enough. I lusted after money, she says. I was arrogant and overbearing when I had it. I was totally miserable when I didn't. I always needed more, and I used bank loans and charge cards to get it. I was constantly in debt. She was adroit at juggling her finances, managed to keep the system going for years. I remember I met one of the founders of Debtors Anonymous. So he was a successful actor, a model, earning in the 6 figures. in New York City in the early 1970s. And yet he was just constantly in debt. His life was just constant turmoil. And he was in AA, and he got together with other people from AA, and they say, hey, this whole addiction thing, it has a counterpart in debting, an addiction to debting. We need to start a 12-step program related to debting. And so they did in something like 1974, which is also the same year that Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous got started. And then the year later, I think Sexaholics Anonymous got started, and other 12-step sex addiction programs got started after that. I believe that Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous was the first. Back to this Gerald Mundis article, 1986 New York Times Magazine. She was adroit at juggling her finances and managed to keep the system going for years, but she was living on the edge, feeling ever more pressured, ever more desperate. Finally, it all collapsed. I was wiped out, she said. Everything I had was gone. When I came into the program, I was hysterical, I was stunned, I was suicidal, I couldn't even function. Discussion of personal finances, particularly indebtedness, may be the last American taboo. Yet roughly 1 out of every 12 Americans is overwhelmed by debt. In June 1985, the Federal Reserve Board reported that consumer debt for the first quarter of last year had soared to 72% of consumer income and was continuing to rise. Debtors Anonymous got started apparently in 1976, modeled on Alcoholics Anonymous, and it provides moral support for those in debt. Organization is growing rapidly. At each meeting, one member serves as principal speaker. This one, it is Ruth, who has been attending for 3 years. Tonight, she's relaxed as she tells her story, breaking into laughter several times. She is no longer in debt. Her business is thriving. Ruth concludes and opens the remaining hour to general discussion. Public relations man says he understands her earlier despair. He was $45,000 in debt 2.5 years ago when he first came to DA, and he felt crushed and hopeless. Never understood money or what I did with it, he says. Now he has paid off $15,000 of his debts, and his marriage, which had been in trouble because of his financial difficulties, is much stronger. A physical therapist in her early 30s expresses her pleasure having watched Ruth change over the last 3 years. It was months, she says, before she first saw her smile. Young man in a sweatshirt with the sleeves cut off talks about his fear of asking his employer for a raise. I know better, I'm learning, but deep down inside, I still don't believe I am worth more money. Woman in her late 20s is clearly uncomfortable. She finds it nearly incomprehensible, she says, that Ruth and others can cite specific amounts of income and debt so casually. She has been in the program 8 months, but still hasn't been able to talk in anything but generalities. She wants to tell them now exactly what she does and how much debt she's carrying. She has to force the words out. She works in computer art. She says she owes $25,000. She is shaken, but also appears relieved. Another woman gives her a hand to squeeze. Man with his temples going gray recounts a meeting with an officer of the bank that is his major creditor. Acting on suggestions given him here, he successfully negotiated a 6-month moratorium on payments. A woman in her mid-20s suddenly explodes. She's a secretary, and this is only her 4th meeting. I'm furious, she tells him in a taut, quavering voice. I hate being in debt. I hate not having enough. I hate everything about this. That's odd, someone else says, deadpan. The rest of us really loved it. Several people break into laughter. The secretary glares at them. Then suddenly she laughs too. Okay, back to Jim Roy.
How long a process was this before you got to see that there was a setup here, that somehow you had a pre-designed image of being a provider involves struggle and suffering. Yeah. And then we live into our self-fulfilling prophecies, so we do that well. As you say, you win at the game you're playing.
Yeah. I mean, so as my wife got pregnant and her belly grew, and I began noticing I am simply not doing things that I know how to do. Probably a few months to confront that, you know what? I'm likely to not do them.
Wow.
And I remember when a friend said to me, like, usually I'm a very happy person. When I'm not on, sort of, people pick up on it. So a very close friend just looked at me. She said, what is it, Jim? What's your private nightmare? Mm. And for the first time in my life, I actually said it to someone. I said, poverty. And, you know, my expectation in that moment is that life should disappear right now. I should simply be, my vote is canceled. I should die. But it wasn't.
So when you say I should die, that's a little confusing.
That inside myself, this was the unutterable truth.
That you would die in poverty, or you would cause?
That having admitted this, life was not worth living anyways.
Right.
Right? So this was, I would say, rather die.
This was the ultimate confession.
Yeah. This was like, you know, this was exactly what I never wanted to have to deal with. Exactly. Precisely.
Right.
Like a worse dream come true. And, but the strange truth, as people find, you know, is like when you admit something like that, you don't die. Or maybe something dies, maybe the ego kind of dies a certain death, though it seems able to come back and die again. But I found I began to be able to talk and to become bigger than my fear and to examine the structure, you know, the structure of my childhood and all the unlived.
And Alex says in the chat, people should stop. Oh, stop that. Go back. Okay.
Something dies, maybe the ego.
Okay, so Alex says people should stop obsessing over the downside with respect to asking for a raise, asking for a date, etc. Yeah, but what if you can't? Okay, Alex, I'm sure there are things in your life where you don't have 100% control over your own reactions, that even you, Alex, have things that you are powerless over. For example, you can't control other people. You can't completely control your body. You can't control your disease. And so for some people, they can't control their obsession with debt. All right, let's go back to this Gerald Mundus article in the New York Times, 1986. At meeting's end, people help put the chairs away and straighten the room. They leave slowly milling about, breaking into smaller groups to talk or to head out for coffee or food. Some people walk into their first meeting of Debtors Anonymous earning more than $100,000 a year. Others are on welfare or unemployment. Some owe amounts substantially over six figures. Others no more than $500 or $1,000. Numbers don't matter, says John H., communications executive who's been in the program since its earliest days. It's what debt has done to your life, the toll in human misery it is taking. There are doctors and lawyers in DA, house painters, university professors, carpenters, writers, comics, psychologists, nurses, secretaries, executives, artists, actors, stock clerks, stockbrokers. I met a lot of writers. That's my favorite peer group in these type of 12-step programs. Debtors Anonymous has absorbed the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous, which are concerned with the spiritual well-being of members. But the program, again, like AA, is in no way religious. Its membership includes Christians and atheists, Jews and agnostics. The organization's preamble, which is read aloud at the beginning of each meeting, states, DA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Debtors Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from compulsive debt. So I have exciting news. I have bought some foam to improve the sound quality in my room. So I'm going to start putting up some foam on the walls here near my mic. So this thing's becoming more professional by the day, guys. And I got a good price for it. I bought it on Amazon. Yeah, as long as you can control your sphincter, everything is fine. But guess what? There are times when you can't control your sphincter. If you have strong diarrhea, it's going to come out, bro. It is going to come out. Also, when you age, you may well lose control of your sphincter. Yep, only the best for Luke's audience. You feel so appreciated. I am glad. I'm going to be putting up the foam after this show. We're going to have a foam party here at the headquarters of the Luke Ford Show. All right, back to Gerald Mundus. Compulsive and debt are key words here. Compulsive in DA terms means that the individual has a history of repeatedly incurring debt despite negative emotional and financial consequences. Each one somehow justifies each new loan or late payment, or borrows to obtain relief from pressures often perceived as intolerable. So we're talking here about how to move from basketball American to usury American. Compulsive debt is real, says Nancy Dombrowski, a New York psychotherapist who specializes in addiction. People know that it's self-destructive, but they continue to borrow and buy anyway. It is an addiction, just as serious as cocaine, pills, or alcohol. Another psychotherapist who specializes in dependency says the compulsion to use debt and credit is just like any other compulsion. The compulsion to overeat, for example, it is progressive and it finally goes out of the individual's control. By debt, Debtors Anonymous means non-collateralized or unsecured debt, anything from a personal loan to falling a month or two behind in the rent. So the most that I've ever fallen behind with rent, I think I was once about 5 days late, and that's it. And I twice bounced a check in 1994 for a small amount, like $50, $60. A secured loan in the form of a mortgage or a car purchased on time, on the other hand, is acceptable. If things go wrong, says one member, your creditor takes your security, but you are clean. You don't owe anyone money. Subject is deep, but the deeper issue at Debtors Anonymous is the quality of life. Getting out of debt and mastering your money leads to profound changes, says John. You get back control of your life. You own it. You gain self-esteem. The fear leaves you. Prosperity enters, not just financially, but in everything from your response to a sunny day to the quality of your relationships. All that flashy outside stuff, paying everyone off, big jumps in income, that does happen, but foundation, the internal mechanism of the change is spiritual. So if people want to call into the show, let me know. I'll turn on the phone line. So just let me know in the chat. Meanwhile, let's go back to Jim Roy.
Kind of dies a certain death, though it seems able to come back and die again. But I found I began to be able to talk and to become bigger than my fear and to examine the structure, the structure of my childhood and all the unlived, painful incidents and moments, and most profoundly, simply the rules, the way I seem to be constituted, so that these issues are not accidental. It's kind of a joke. When I met my wife, she was already engaged to a multimillionaire. Wow. But see, when you begin seeing, that's why this is a very powerful perspective to look at human ways of being and doing. As she couldn't have fulfilled her, say, belief system. Yeah. And he was a wonderful guy. I knew the guy.
A lot of discussion about investment going on in the chat, but guys, I think the very best investment you can make right now is in the alt-right.com corporation. That has very huge upside. The alt-right.com corporation. Wow. I was miserable while I was in the throes of debting, says Gail, a social worker. My emotions were chaotic. I was fearful, sleepless, and I couldn't think about anything but my debts. All that has changed. I'm calm now. I'm no longer consumed by personal worries. I have a sense of serenity. Similarity between Debtors Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous is not coincidental. DA was founded in 1976 by a man who had been in Alcoholics Anonymous for 27 years. Despite a high income, his debts had mounted to the point at which he felt crippled by them and almost unable to bear the pressure. Found another person in similar straits. They talked seriously about their debts, and that was DA's first meeting. And I heard from one of the guys in that room. He eschews any further detail about himself. People who know him well says his reticence stems from a deep spirituality and genuine humility, right? That's me. My reticence also stems from a deep spirituality and a genuine humility. A sly and often humorously cantankerous man, he says, is because he doesn't want to be set apart, as was to some degree the co-founder of AA, Bill Wilson, thus be prevented from participating in the program as freely or easily as any other member. How does Debtors Anonymous work? It offers techniques, strategies, and tools, but it is basically a process, a gradual change in perceptions and attitudes about money and self. I remember one of my first Debtors Anonymous meetings, I met this stand-up comic who I really liked. I'd seen him perform few years before. And I remember I talked to him before his performance about the book Game Change regarding the 2008 election. Now we're in Debtors Anonymous together, and we talk about our program. Admitting the problem is essential, and that's not easy. Members say denial is nearly universal. It is the divorce, it is the job market, late paying accounts, taxes, the economy, interest rates, the new roof, high rents. Often an individual has to be driven right up against the wall and through it before being willing to face facts. An incoming member is first encouraged to avoid taking out any new debt for that day. That concept is vital. Next week, next month are too much to think about, the program says, but anyone can abstain from incurring a new debt for one day, this day.
It's a great guy. But, you know, but as we began to be able to talk about this, and it wasn't an instant, oh, now I got it, now I'm healed, but there was a kind of an excitement for me, especially, you know, as a husband and a father and in danger of not providing, I was terrified. But as a philosopher and as like, something's going on here, and a kind of a freedom emerging for me, so I was very excited. And I could go in a minute from being, oh my God, to, oh my God. And
I just want to say something about what you're talking about, because it's very powerful. Because what I hear you saying is that there was something undistinguished.
Yes.
And you found yourself behaving in a particular way that was going to lead you down some very dark path with no cheese at the end of it. And because of being confronted, you went into this inquiry and you uncovered something. And I think that's the value of talking about this subject, is the whole concept of, unless you uncover it, distinguish it, and bring it to the light, it's always there running the show, and you don't have access to it. But now all of a sudden, once you could distinguish it and actually fess up and own it, you could suddenly, it's not that it went away, the challenge was still make money, provide for family, but you could actually see that there was room to even be excited by it, because there's...
Wow, this lady is a terrible interviewer. Talks way too much. The best interview questions are the shortest, generally speaking. Income is a second area of consideration, and it's usually dealt with in two stages. First, stabilizing it to match monthly expenses. Second, increasing it. Stabilization may involve seeking a moratorium from a creditor, taking in a roommate temporarily, and similar options, although the major concern is to avoid new debt. An increase in earnings is a logical extension by taking on a part-time job, requesting a promotion, changing jobs, or aggressively seeking new business. Members are committed to repaying each of their debts in full, but only on a schedule consistent with a tolerable life. Living for one's creditors, the program says, results in feelings of deprivation, impoverishment, and futility. This is not about working harder and eating cat food. This is about improving your life. Regular attendance at meetings is important, as in Alcoholics Anonymous. Each chapter functions autonomously, but is linked together through the general organization. Members are welcome to attend the meetings of any chapter. Most move back and forth between several different ones, often stop in at meetings in other cities when they travel. At each chapter, a new member is elected every 3 months or so to chair meetings, generally held once a week. There are no dues or fees for members. Voluntary contributions dropped into a basket at each meeting at DA's sole source of income. It is wholly self-supporting, neither seeks nor accepts any funds from outside sources. So, for example, Alcoholics Anonymous will not take money from non-alcoholics. Debtors Anonymous won't take money from non-debtors. Alcoholics Anonymous limits the maximum amount of money that you can give in a year is $2,000. So I think 12-step programs are unique in this respect. Have you ever heard of any other nonprofit that won't take your money? Okay, whoa. I got Monsieur in the chat. Mons, what's going on, sir?
What's up? Hello, Luke Ramsey. How do you feel about becoming a personal finance guru now?
It's an honor and a pleasure.
So I looked at the topic. I'm like, well, I'll pick up this book, and I've actually been reading it, and I'm about a third of the way through because it's a short book and zippy. And it has a lot more lessons that are applicable than I would have thought, because I would say, confession, that I am a compulsive under-earner.
Yeah, like I have a friend in synagogue who earns north of $600,000 a year. And when I talked to him about under earning, he said, "Oh, wow, I think I'm an under earner too." And I think that's true. I mean, most people probably under earn their abilities.
Yeah, well, here's the thing that I think is true. When you ask for money and someone just comes back tomorrow and is like, yes, absolutely, that's probably a bad sign. And that's happened to me every single time I've done this in my life. So that, I mean, yeah, I said before that I'm paid below median for where I'm at, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just jump in as we go along here. If there's any particular section of the book that speaks to you that you want to elaborate on it, just write me a note in the chat or just jump in. Meanwhile, I'm going to play a little bit more from Jim Roy. He's a philosopher and I believe a friend of Gerald Mundis, the author of the main book that we are discussing today, Earn What You Deserve, How to Stop Under-Earning and Start Thriving. So Jim Roy played an important role in this important book.
Now some freedom to operate in a new context.
Yeah, the issue itself became legitimate. And that's why I say we could do nothing but begin to even present that it could be legitimate. So one of my closest friends at the time, an old friend, used to be a hippie, a girlfriend, we were hippies together. And she was on welfare. She came from a very wealthy family. She was on welfare. I'm going through my thing, but we began talking. And she was a sober alcoholic. And we'd run this analogy. Say, okay, I got it. If you're an alcoholic, that's the way we began framing it. So if you're an alcoholic, that means if you drink, you're going to be miserable. And you don't have to drink. Now, that's what makes a difference for the alcoholic. First of all, they don't want to admit it. But once they do, then they really see, if I drink, I'll be miserable. But then they hear, and you don't have to drink a day at a time. That's news. People can hardly imagine how strange that sounds to an active.
So the two most famous 12-step programs dealing with money are Debtors Anonymous. The first one started around 1976, and then the next one, Under Earners Anonymous, which began around 2004. Now there is a new program. It's called Financial Under Earners Anonymous. So there's Under Earners Anonymous, Debtors Anonymous, Financial Under Earners Anonymous. So here are symptoms of financial under earning. 1, we find we cannot reach higher levels of earning despite our best efforts to do so. The conventional pieces of earning power, like social status, socioeconomic background, gender, race, education level, willpower, creativity, leadership, etc., was somehow not affecting in helping us to prosper. So when I'm reading this, Monsieur, I want you to pick, say, a section from this book, Earn What You Deserve, and we'll discuss it. 2, we bought high and sold low. When investing in property, stock, art, or other commodities, we noticed we continually bought items for top dollar, but then consistently sold them at a loss. 3, we consistently felt and were stuck in jobs or careers where we were earning less than what we needed to cover all of our needs, some of our wants, and still have money left over to put into savings. In short, we were financially under earning. So this reminds me, when I moved back to Los Angeles in 1994, I moved in with a professor at UCLA who'd been a friend of mine. And after I'd been there for a couple of weeks, he came padding into my room one night and asked me if I wanted a blowjob. And I said no. And he asked me if I was sure. And I said no. And I said yes, I was sure. And no, I didn't want one. And so I moved out from him, and I essentially lived out of my car for the next 6 months. Then in early 1995, I met this Israeli guy at a Chabad synagogue, and he thought I had a good aura. And so he said that I could move in with him, live with him for free in exchange for helping him with a movie script. So he had a degree in film and TV from NYU, New York University, and he paid for that by working on 42nd Street in electronics. So one day he got a bunch of electronics and he sent me off to this yard sale to sell electronics. And I didn't sell one. I mean, that was so bad. Like people would come over and they wanted to bargain, and I just wanted to stick with the prices that I was told. So I was there for 3 hours. I did not sell one single thing. All right. 4. This is symptom 4 from Financial Underowners Anonymous. We avoided promotions or taking on more responsibility at work because the financial compensation did not seem equal to the additional work. We felt unmotivated by small increases in pay. 5, we were financially disorganized at work and in life, having no plan, trajectory, or larger vision. Our path of earning was meandering and directionless. Our diminished income was a result of this vagueness. 6, we felt uneasy with achieving and receiving higher levels of income. We found ourselves in conflict with building healthy bridges between money, God, and spirituality. 7, we often felt a sense of entitlement, thinking the world owes us more income, a sense of resentment over not receiving our fair share of the profits. 8, we experienced a pattern of living downwards to our level of financial under-earning rather than prosperously earning upward to our ideal standard of living. 9, prosperity deflection. When money is offered to us, we often said no thanks, when it would have been just as easy and more prosperous to say yes thanks. We frequently viewed offered money with suspicion, fear, unease, distrust, or contempt. 10, when faced with multiple job offers, we choose the lower paying one, even if the jobs are all equal in workload. When asked for our salary requirements, we give a lowball figure instead of asking for top dollar or for what is competitive. 11, we experience vagueness, confusion, fear, and embarrassment around knowing the exact figure we need to earn to afford all of our needs, some of our wants, and to still have enough left over to put into savings. So one of the tools I was given was add up your monthly expenses and then prorate that to how much money per hour. So I think that it came out to something like $25 an hour for me on a 40-hour work week, and then double it. And so that comes to $50 an hour. That's to give yourself enough money for savings and vacation and investment. And then don't take any work that is less than $50 an hour. So once you make that commitment, that's your prosperity date. 12, we have subjected ourselves to others whose earning power was greater than ours. We entered into relationships of dependency, hiding under the wings of others instead of spreading our own wings and establishing our own financial independence. We were unable to support ourselves and accepted contributions from others in exchange for our autonomy, not understanding the price for doing so and the loss of self-esteem, self-respect, and personal dignity. 13, we financially under-earn, do not have enough money to pay all of our expenses, and then make up the shortfall by using credit, taking out loans, or going into debt. Thus, we became trapped in a cycle of under-earning, debting, and losing our financial solvency. Okay, let's go back to Monsieur.
I was thinking about the lack of confidence in asking for raises and whatnot. I wonder if it's related to sort of a lower self-esteem, imposter syndrome that is frequently encountered as you go higher. Like, the opposite of Dunning-Kruger is that people with high IQ underestimate how smart they are, or like an HR person glibly puts it, we only hire people with imposter syndrome.
Wow. Yeah, I think a lot of people just don't feel comfortable with prosperity and with earning a good wage because at core they feel unworthy. Okay, let's go back to Jim Roy and Monsieur. If you've got the book at hand, then we'll come to you in a minute and you can read some excerpt from the book that speaks to you and you can explain why it speaks to you.
Alcoholic. But all of a sudden they realize they don't have to and they don't. So I said, okay, all right, so if that's how it goes, then. So I said, if I say I'm a compulsive under-earner, that means if I under-earn, I'm going to be miserable. That part I had it done. That was clear as a bell. There was definitely a misery here. And if something didn't turn around, there was going to be more misery. So I'm a compulsive under-earner. Means if I do that, there will be misery. And then I ran the analogy. I said, and I don't have to under-earn a day at a time. Wow. But now I couldn't hear that. But I had, wait, but that's exactly what the alcoholic or the addict couldn't hear. So I began just practicing, and we talked this over and over and over. If I'm an under earner, means if I do that, there will be misery. There's no escaping that. And I don't have to under earn. I don't have to under earn. I don't have to under. I can be an under earner, and I don't have to do it. Just like someone could be an alcoholic, they don't have to do it. It's like, wow, that began to
Percolate.
vibrate, percolate, you know. And I began to actually hear, you mean I don't have to do this? You mean there's something that...
Monsieur, is there any passage from this book that you'd like to read because it speaks to you?
So I guess I'll do one section that I think is helpful, and then one that I'm already doing that I can say is good. Let's see.
Give me the page.
On 98, 99. Under earners nearly always undervalue and underprice themselves. And then it talks about this person, what's her face, Gloria. And she said on the second page, she summarized in a short paragraph her expenses, her obligations, listed her take-home pay, and pointed out there was only a marginal difference between income and outgo. Then she wrote a cover letter requesting a raise, stating a specific figure which she knew brought her close to the top in her field but did not exceed it, and drawing attention to her supporting memo. That this person is able to step forward, ask for basically the top of their field, back it up, and do so boldly is great. That's not something I do. So I think that's good. And then expanding into, this is a different section, but on 110, expanding into new areas, but earning will also open up unforeseen opportunities. And then he tells his own story about being a writer and breaking into consultancy, which did open up new doors. I would say that yes, everyone should own their own business, not just for income diversification, as he says here, but also because it opens doors. When you're doing your secondary business, you meet people and you form these weak ties that are not always the same weak ties that your peers may have. So I would say that I continually get responsibilities, which are better because I'm able to impress people and build more weak ties because of this. Although getting more money is something that I'm still working on.
Yeah, that's good. And here's something related. There's a book, Real Artists Have Day Jobs and Other Awesome Things They Don't Teach You in School. So while the practical aspects of new adulthood can be nerve-wracking, dating, job hunting, money managing, most important task of all is figuring out who you are, where you fit in the world. Author and comic Sarah Benincasa, now in her mid-30s, had an absolutely harrowing early 20s, now on the other side. She has lots of hard-earned wisdom and common sense to share. Real Artists Have Day Jobs includes 52 witty, provocative essays on how to live like a real adult, especially for those who have chosen a slightly more offbeat path to get there. And I like this idea that even if you have your own business, for many people, they should have a side job working for someone else, because having your own business can be nerve-wracking. While when you work for someone else, it's just, it can be incredibly relaxing. So most of my life, I essentially worked for myself as a blogger. And then I had my own Alexander Technique business where I'd have to develop clients. And then I found it's just tremendously relaxing to also have a job where you work for someone else, where you can just go into work, just be a task performer, do the tasks, pick up a regular paycheck. There are a lot of jobs where there's a tremendous amount of downtime where you can read, where they're not necessarily paying you to be working all the time. They're just paying you to be available to work. So there are a lot of real jobs, like in offices, where 50% of the time you have downtime. You can be reading books. You can be reading websites. You can be prepping for your YouTube show. So while it's important, as you say, Monsieur, to have your own business, for many people, it's also important to have a job. And that way you have both multiple sources of income and you can enjoy the freedom and relaxation that comes with having a regular job, a regular paycheck, where you just go into work, you perform tasks, and you leave, and you may even have abundant downtime that you can use to a good purpose, and you just don't have to worry about it. When I've had jobs, I've never thought about them when I was off the job, because I just went in, I was a task performer, I got my check, I read books, I had a pleasant time. So there are a lot of benefits to having a job in addition to having your own business. Manjur, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Having a job, which I do, is great. As Alex DeLarge says, he misses the social aspects. That's what he misses about having a job. But yes, you have the time to do downtime to do things you like. You aren't every time you're doing something for your own business and you're wasting time, you're wasting your own money. Whereas if you're pooping
Yes.
at work,
Yeah.
you're just like, it's not really a problem.
Right. And it's not necessarily because you're cheating your employer. There are a lot of jobs where you're simply paid for being available to work. And
Well,
so,
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
mean, I'm salaried, so I'm
Right.
not really cheating my employer, but
Yeah. Yeah. So there are a lot of salary jobs or jobs where you're simply paid for showing up and being available to work. And if there's not a task to perform at that time, you don't have to sweat it. You don't have to worry about it. You can relax. You can chit chat. You can read a book on your Kindle, on your computer. You can read the New York Times, and the job is there for you. You come in, you perform. You're there a certain number of hours. You may get health care. You may get you get a salary, and you don't have to worry. While when you're working for yourself, you're much more likely to be worried and thinking about your job, particularly on days that you're not doing your job. So I want to read some more from this excellent book, Earn What You Deserve, talking about page 53. So first thing to do, don't shoot, I surrender. Absolutely necessary to accept that you are an under-earner. It's a hard thing for most people to do, but without such acceptance, you'll only be applying band-aids. There will be no real change. If you have doubts about the reason you lack sufficient money in your life, or if you feel angry, panicky, or in despair over the possibility that you might be an under-earner, set those doubts and emotions aside, and alone in a quiet, private place, as best you can, surrender. Admit to yourself that you have problems with under-earning and that it has caused a lot of pain and trouble in your life. So get clear. So one of the ways that I did this is, I got a worksheet from my sponsor. I'll see if I can pull it up, that asked about 60 kind of awkward, invasive questions about the role that under-earning had played in my life. And it was incredibly sobering. So I'm going to try to pull that up now and read to you some of the questions that were asked. Hang on.
Could happen. And it took me, in really difficult confrontation, I would say about a year from being able to admit that I was an under-earner. And the baby was born, and we were running out of money, and it was really, this was real. This was like shooting with real bullets. And we did all kinds of things that I wouldn't even have time to say all. But we drew up a contract, setting up consequences. I began to discover.
You and your wife did this?
Yeah. It's like, how much would be enough? I never knew what was enough. Enough was going to be when I bought the mansion in the Hamptons. But as it turned out, enough was like somewhat just under $1,000. This was quite a while ago.
I think this is one of such a key issue, is most of us live in a kind of vague picture of what's enough, or a vague idea about what we need.
Specifically.
So in 2016 or 2015, when I was going to these various 12-step programs related to earning and debting, I decided to write a history of my under-earning. So I'm going to read some excerpts from that. So when my computer died and I had to ship it away for 3 weeks, I went to my first 12-step meeting for money problems in May of 2015. And coming out of the meeting, I checked my phone and saw that I'd received a $50 donation from my blog. Wow, I thought this program really works. So until 2016, I'd never earned more than $45,000 in a year. I just lived my life as a chronic under-earner and underachiever. I started doing daily chores around age 5. We lived in this cold home in Manchester, England at the time. My father was doing his second PhD, this one at Manchester University. And I volunteered to do the dishes because it gave me an opportunity to soak my hands and my arms in hot, sudsy water, and it took away the pain of the cold. I got hit a lot by my stepmother, and I was a pretty miserable child. And so I developed this habit of trying to lie to reduce my beatings. And lying remains an instinct for me whenever I'm in trouble. I always want to try to lie my way out of things. But when I'm caught, then I realized, just like when I was a child, the best thing to do is just to make a full confession. And that tends to reduce the intensity of the beating that I'm about to receive. I learned early on in life, it really takes the anger out of people when you make a complete confession. I remember every day my parents would put me down for a nap after lunch, and I'd just scream and scream and scream until falling asleep. And I just developed this kind of toxic stew of hatred against authority. And I kind of learned to love hurting myself because I saw how much that hurt my parents. And I learned to glory in my hopelessness and in my pain. Kind of got addicted to collapsing. I got addicted to losing. I'll bloody show them, I kept thinking. So to escape from my misery, I took up daydreaming. I learned to daydream my days away. Then around age 7 or 8, I took up pornography, which is another intense and wonderful way to escape. So I loved excitement because it took me out of my miserable state. I loved excessive exercise and excessive reading and excessive eating, particularly of forbidden foods such as candy. Those were a sin in my Seventh-day Adventist upbringing. I'd steal money from my parents and I'd buy candy till there was this 4th grade campout where my teacher caught me with this big candy stash, and she reported it to my parents, who were very upset, and I got a beating. And I learned to stop stealing from my parents. I never stole from other people. I never developed that habit. I only stole from my parents, and only for a couple of years, ages 7 to 9. I was an indifferent student at school. As with work, I didn't put much effort into it unless the topic interested me. I didn't like the reality of my life, so I sought out every opportunity to escape from reality. I was the class clown. I thirsted for attention, and I kept acting out until I got some. The more secure I felt, the more I'd make subversive jokes. I gloried in provoking my teachers into hitting me, and when they did, I felt like a righteous victim. We moved to California in the summer of 1977, and what was awesome about that is that there was no corporal punishment in California. My teachers stopped hitting me, and my parents stopped hitting me. So I began 6th grade, and I saw that many of my classmates had jobs, so I asked for a job from a family that admired my father's religious teachings. And I worked in their garden. I did various chores for about 6 months for about $2.50 an hour, till they fired me for not putting much effort in, for not following directions, or for just being an overall lousy worker. I was humiliated, particularly when the black wife came to our home and explained to my parents in front of me why I was fired. The same tunnel vision I displayed in that first job, that same reluctance to look for things to do beyond what was assigned, that same lack of interest in my task, that same boredom with taking directions, that same lack of empathy, lack of conscientiousness, all of those character defects still challenge me. Monsieur, do you have any thoughts or any more readings, anything at all?
Well, first of all, I was not the person that cheats others. I am the person that gets cheated. Which is partly why I like to take Beverly Hills around everywhere I go, because those people tend not to cheat you except in very big, spectacular ways that don't touch your primary source of income. So it's like, oh, well, okay. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure that if I kept the company of less scrupulous folks, I would end up as one of those Reddit stories. But I I did go to a car dealership, and I came out skinned to the bone, because I said, hey, approximately the MSRP is what you need to make a healthy, fair profit commensurate with other industries, right? And it keeps the lights on. So, I think that I should be as fair to you as you should be as fair to me. and they disagreed because they tried to tap on other charges, and I spent like a week on the phone with the parent corporation, getting those reversed with those fancy upsales to get nothing. So when you go to certain people and say, like, I'll give you a fair deal, you give me a fair deal, this is a high trust environment, we trust each other, right? Sometimes the answer is actually no, and you get punched in the face. And I still don't do well in those situations. I would rather be in the the high trust environment. Like the fact that I can say my pay is below median is because it's all fully disclosed. It's like it's all right there out in the open. They trust that I won't like go on a shooting for being slightly overpaid and stuff like that, or like get really mad at people. So there's that part about. But the other part of your stories about your shirking and your lack of conscientiousness and your apathy, I think you would have done very fine as a professional. I don't think those are necessarily huge character faults as long as you have the ability to solve problems creatively and, manage clients and office politics and, be reasonably charismatic, which I think that you are. So I think you would have been better off not doing like manual labor and, and just being a guy in a suit.
Okay, so this is back to my history of my under earning. So I got fired from every job I ever held through 10th grade. And summer of 1982 was awesome because that was the first time I held a job that I liked. I was a summer camp counselor, and it was the first job I ever held that I didn't get fired from. I only got reprimanded once. So, and I fell in love for the first time with a girl who reciprocated my affection. So, summer of 82 was awesome. That was the summer between my sophomore and junior years of high school. In the summer of 1983, I also did not get fired. I worked as a janitor. I didn't enjoy the work as much, but I made about 5 times as much money, and my job review was mediocre. There are some incidents I remember from that summer working as a janitor. I asked a Vietnam vet on our crew if he was a baby killer. Surprisingly, I alienated much of the crew, and they took to tearing me down till this like Latino immigrant said that was unchristian of them, and he reprimanded them. And so that was kind of awesome. I remember walking back from one task and seeing some friends and just like sitting down and chatting with them. Then my boss walked by and noticed me, didn't say anything, but I paid for it on my job review. I remember also sitting in the office with my cleaning crew after the day was done, and we were just telling jokes and hanging out on the clock until we all finally punched out. So I did not have a particularly strong work ethic, though it never would have occurred to me to directly steal anything. I've never been a direct thief. I've never lifted money except for those early years from my parents. I was a thief in the sense that I didn't feel much obligation to work all the time. I was on the clock. I often had that intention to be honorable, but my flesh was weak. I hated working. I hated working as a janitor. Looked for every opportunity to tell jokes and to enjoy distractions. I particularly liked romantic intrigue on the job and sexual tension. That's my favorite form of distraction. Not satisfied to be a worker among workers, either I got attention or I lost interest in my job. I was just always looking to escape, looking for the world to be a more exciting place, looking to have intense conversations and intrigue and fun. I was always interested in doing everything but my work. And that's been a characteristic of my my work habits over the decades. And as I write this introspection on my under-earning, I wrote this in 2016. It's 2015. It's stunning how these same character defects have been with me from the beginning. My parents would often admonish me, don't take the easy way out, because my tendency is always to do that very thing. I'd rather watch sports than work or study. It's always been easier for me to numb out to distractions such as TV or to porn than to do the hard work necessary to create an honorable life. Monsieur, are there any things that your parents repeatedly said to you, any instructions that have kind of been burned into your mind?
What you do at an early age puts you at a certain level in society. And once you're at a certain level in society, it's very hard to move up or down. So you had better get to the highest level you can. And I got to basically like an upper middle class level, which is pretty good. I like it. I'm not Babs, but I do like it. Um, I was thinking about the easy way out though, and here's my advice to anyone who might be sympathizing with that. If you always find yourself taking the easy way out, almost everyone follows the path of least resistance. But what you can do is try to think of a path to success which approximates your easy way out so that you are succeeding doing things that are concordant with your personality. Okay. Your character flaws can't ever be solved necessarily, but they can be mitigated by putting yourself in the right situation where they also bring out some of their strengths, because most traits are a two-sided coin.
Yeah, excellent. All right, let me get back to my history of under-earning. So I graduated from high school in 1984 with a 3.3 GPA at an 1135 SAT score, which was not particularly impressive. Just never learned to put much effort into topics that did not interest me. I went back to Australia for a year after high school, lived with my brother, and I did humdrum work. I worked at Kmart for a few months, and the only way I was able to get that job was by not revealing my intentions to return to America within a year. I got admonished for talking too much on the job, particularly to girls. I got admonished for calling my boss mate. I told my Aboriginal superior that the best way to get an Aboriginal girl pregnant was to ejaculate on her shoe and let the flies do the rest. After a few weeks of this work, I resolved that I would study hard when I went to college. About 4 months in, a friend of my brother's landed me a great job for about 3 times the pay. So I now made about $25 an hour. In 1984, I had a contract to clean and maintain the Boyne Island shopping center. As long as I showed up, did the work, I was my own boss. I was on a contract. And I also got to read on average 2 hours or more a day in my little shed. I must have done a lousy job because the shopping center never again extended such a contract to anyone. I came back to California in June of 1985, started a full-time unpaid internship at K-High Cahill Radio in the news department. After a month, I got hired because I'd pulled an all-nighter covering a particular story. And so they were impressed. They gave me a minimum wage job for 16 hours a week to do the news on the weekend. And at least I was doing work that I loved. I bought my first car that summer of 1985. It was a 1968 VW Bug. And then I totaled it in September through my own carelessness. I was changing the radio station while I was driving, and I ran into a parked school bus. Then I worked construction that only paid $4 an hour, which was about 1/5 of what I earned in Australia. So that was discouraging, but at least I met some people that I liked, and just doing work around people that I liked made me enjoy the work. So the same work with people I didn't care for, I hated the work. But when I got to do the work for people I admired, then I enjoyed the work. It was amazing just how much difference it made for me, the people that I was around. I don't know if you had that experience, Mons, doing the identical work, but in one situation, you're around people that you like or admire, and in other situation, you're around people that you're indifferent to.
I like to think that I generally get along with people and that I like them. I try to be a pleasant person.
Okay, so back to this essay. I remember I liked my landscaping work a little too much. And so I quit most of my classes at the community college in the fall of 1985. I quit being the editor of my college newspaper, and he took 2 classes instead of the scheduled 5 so that I could work more in landscaping. But working in landscaping in the wintertime was absolutely miserable. And I had this familiar feeling that people my own age were excelling me and were moving ahead, moving into adulthood much more rapidly than I was. Like most people my age, at age 16, went and got their driver's license. I did not get mine until I was 18. My peers were moving ahead with their education. They were working in higher paying jobs. They had girlfriends, and I felt lagging in all areas. I felt out of it. I felt isolated. I felt cold, sad, miserable. I had a sense there was something wrong with me. But I thought, oh, if I just make better decisions, I'll get out of this mess. So spring semester 1987, I returned to work full time. I get almost straight A's. And then I work about 30 hours a week in landscaping and in radio. I feel like my life is on track. So I've changed from initially I was going to go to Sac State, and then I go, oh, I'll go to UC Davis. And then finally in the spring of 87, I said, I'm going to go to UCLA. And I got accepted to UCLA. Spent almost all my time either studying or working. I didn't socialize much. I felt like I'd finally got my life on track, finally started getting straight A's at school. And then February of 1988, disaster struck me in the form of an illness, later diagnosed as chronic fatigue syndrome, which is a diagnosis that they give when they don't know what's wrong with you. So waste paper basket diagnosis. When everything else fails, they'll call it CFS. So this would keep me in bed about 20 hours a day for the next 6 years. And this hellish time convinced me there was something wrong with me beyond my illness, and that my own willpower was not sufficient to get me through life. So I embraced God. I converted to Judaism and hoped to remake my life following Judaism, following its principles, teachings, and practices. So I think I've always been someone fairly high in neuroticism. And when I collapsed in a chronic fatigue syndrome, I embraced Judaism as a way to remake my life. After making about 2/3 of a recovery from CFS, getting the medication Nardil in late 1993, I moved to Los Angeles in March of 1994. After 6 years in bed, I was super social, going to every interesting social event I found. I checked out as many synagogues as possible. I dated as many women as possible. It was an exciting time, lots of emotional and spiritual highs and lots of stunning lows as well. Lived out of my car from June of 1994 until February of 1995. I wasn't interested in taking a regular job or going back to UCLA to finish my economics degree. I thought I should do the opposite of whatever I was doing before I got sick. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll go into acting. And so I had a few auditions. I went to about 30 auditions. I got extra work. I went through all my savings. I started living off credit cards. When I decided to write my first book, took a year to write my first book, maxed out my credit cards at $20,000. And when I had to find a new place to live, I got a room with a Holocaust survivor. He had 24 cats. And so in exchange for cleaning up the cats, I only had to pay $200 a month rent. Monsieur, was there ever a time in your life when you felt like you'd hit rock bottom?
Well, no. My life has really been extremely easy. So, no. I have overdrafted quite a few times to my own idiocy, not keeping enough cash reserve in my checking account. Like when I was slightly younger and 22, I was like, if stock does better than cash, why don't I only buy stock and I'll just sell stock when I need it? That is not logistically sound.
Yeah. Okay, back to my history of under-earning. So in the summer of 1996, I'd finished my first book and waiting for it to get published. It finally came out in 1999 from Prometheus Books, A History of X, 100 Years of Sex in Film. I think I earned a total of $1,400 of royalties on that book. So summer of 1996, I started working as a temp secretary, earning about $12 an hour on average. I got fired from 3 different temp jobs for inappropriate speech, mainly sex-related. I got kicked out of 3 acting schools for the same reason. When I'd land a temp job, I used much of my time on that job to research and edit my book. That would usually get discovered and I'd get in trouble and get a bad reputation. Many cases, I did not get fired because my temp employers liked me. I remember a friend at the time gave me the wise counsel, work only one job at a time, but I wasn't able to live up to that advice. So beginning in about September, I began blogging in July 3, 1997. And by about September, October, I was able to make a living from porn banner ads that I'd place on my blog. And by March of 1998, I was earning about $3,000 a month from my blogging. my financial situation stabilized, and over the next 2 years, I paid off all of my credit card debt. From 1998 to 2015, I never made more than $45,000 in a year, never less than $25,000. And from 1998 to 2007, I made most of my money doing what I loved most, which was writing. 2009, I went back to school to study for 3 years to become a teacher of the Alexander technique. Found the first 18 months so exhausting that I couldn't work much, and limited myself to things I could do from home, such as search engine optimization for people. My credit card debt maxed out at about $52,000 in early 2012 when I took office work and began slowly paying it down. But at the same time, I also took a class in how to put on a one-man play. So even though I had $50,000 in credit card debt, I was still willing to plunk down $2,500 to do a class on how to make a one-man play. And that made its epic debut on Super Bowl Sunday of February 2013. And on my way to my performance in the Valley, my van. So I'd been driving this 1-ton van from about 1996. Okay, I had that van from 1996 to 2013. I think in 2008, I paid $2,000 to put a new engine in it. I wanted to have a big van so that I could live out of it if I needed to. And finally, this van broke down on the way to the debut of my one-man play, Eroticized Rage, and kind of coasted off the 405 freeway. And then the Israeli tow truck driver dropped me off at the theater, and that van died. I did my one-man play. You can find it online on YouTube, Eroticized Rage. It's about 2 hours. I did a more concise 55-minute version that's also on YouTube. So, Monsieur, back to you. So you never had any crashing lows. You realized you made some mistakes, but it sounds like your life has generally come from a solid foundation. I assume you studied hard in school, and you just kept moving on up.
I did not study it hard in school at all. In fact, I was a very lazy student. On the other hand, when I was 16, my school arranged my first job for me, and it was a professional job in a Fortune 500 company. And when you start off at a place like that, you can coast and do very well for yourself so long as you never fuck up. And I have come close to fucking up. In fact, I can sympathize dearly with your statements about, like, saying inappropriate stuff, because I'm autistic, and being autistic means that you sometimes say inappropriate stuff and it can get you in trouble. And I do worry that one day that will catch up with me.
Okay, so I got a DM here from Bernard, and he says, listen to the show We Live in a Society, Season 2, Episode 93, discussing Chris Cantwell, Richard Spencer, and Heel Turn with Simon and Sharia LaBeouf. So let me play a little excerpt from, they talk about 3 men being arrested for a shooting after Richard Spencer's speech at the University of Florida. So let's play a little excerpt here.
Yeah, exactly.
He fucking hates identity Europa.
Yeah, I get it.
Well, he hates it because you're in it, Bob.
Yeah, pretty much. Dude,
But
his
yeah, go ahead.
girlfriend is the
I'm
one
sorry
who
for the
recruited me
interruption.
to Identity Europa. His GF recruited me to Identity Europa, and like,
Are you serious?
Yeah. His girlfriend Erica, she's a nice lady, but she used to live in Florida and was the head of like the Orlando area IE, and so anyways.
A woman leader? Oh shit.
Yeah, there's tons of women leaders. I hope Patrick.
No, I hate Identity Europa.
When
I
I
don't know.
briefly
The guy,
flirted with
the guy that I was, I kind of like went to them myself, but the guy that did my like interviewing process, he was a great guy. Yeah, no, there were a lot of great guys. There's some guys that I still would be like, I would go to bat for them. But that's why I'm trying to get this out of the way, is IE had a good plan. Richard and his people and some of the TRS people messed it up because they let in just anybody, and they let anyone come who wasn't a part of IE and who didn't care about the security briefing. And so that we had a strict like security code that like anybody who was in the security uniforms, which was like the white button down shirts and the khakis or whatever, which like, later became toxic.
that anyone with that had to stay with the group. That, you know, we came into the auditorium through the back. We had a police escort. Like, they had hundreds of different police, and like, you know, they declared a national emergency. So they had National Guard and all that sort of thing there. They were giving us a personal escort into the event. I know, because I had to follow the police officers, like, caravan of vehicles. So all of the security team went in through the back and was given specific police protection. So there was going to be no physical altercations with Antifa. There would be no way for them to be a physical altercation between anyone in the security team and Antifa, because we were given protection, and anybody who wanted to come to the event who wasn't part of security was told to, like, meet up with the caravan beforehand, so that way they could get in through the secure route. Now, Colton Fierce was, I think, part of the security team, but then his brother, Will Fierce, or it was either one way or the other. Well, the two brothers, one was in, one wasn't. And so after the event got out, one of them went out into the crowd. Instead of coming back with the security caravan, they went out into the crowds looking for a fight with Antifa, like, actively. Because, again, they had a clear police escort to avoid any altercation. So they go out, they break security to meet up with their brother. And their brother's already, like, started shit with people. And then I know multiple people that were saying that the two of them and a third guy would get into a car, and would get into their car and start yelling nigger at people. You know, they would start yelling, which is
that's basically the story I heard. And actually, you just enlightened me a little bit. I didn't realize that one of them was, like, directly associated with, like, the security team.
Yeah, no,
because the way Richard like, made it seem after the fact was like, oh, they were just some people who happened to come to see it.
They were staying at the house that Richard and us were staying at. Both of them were. And so that night, they didn't come back to the house, and they were from the Texas group. They were from the Patriot group.
Yep.
And the Texas people were, like, freaking out, and they're like, oh, where's Colton, where's Will, or whatever. I mean, they came to, like, they did the whole shooting thing and then showed up to the little after party. We were all at a Japanese restaurant, and there was, like, a table of, like, 40 of us. We're all hanging out. They show up, like, it was the three of them that were involved in the shooting. And they show up and like, hey, guys, and just, like, everything's fine after they do the shooting thing. Instead of getting out of town like any normal person would, they come to the restaurant that we're all hanging out at, and then don't leave town until, like, midnight that night. Like, they had a good 7-hour window that they could have been out of the state of Florida, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I remember being in the house when the Texas guys got the call that those guys were getting arrested, and they were freaking out, and they're like, oh, don't tell so-and-so. And they, like, tried to keep it a secret from everyone, even though, like, you know, if they would have told us, or they would have told IE, or they would have told even Richard, somebody could have gone out and done damage control for it, or got ahead of it in some way. But no, they just kept it to themselves, and then they left. So high trust white society, you know?
Yeah. It's funny to me that, like, actually, there's one more clip from Richard that I'm going to play before we can just, like, bullshit our way to the end of the stream. It's an issue we've been dancing around for a little while, and it's come up in multiple contexts, like the lack of standards that these people have.
So I'm listening to Sharia LaBeouf, his latest show. His show's called We Live in a Society. This is season 2, episode 93. Wignat's gonna Wignat.
And it's like, I mean, first of all, I think, like, street activism is a fucking stupid strategy for especially for ideas like this in this climate. It's just dumb. And, like, the thing that really, like, concerns me most about Richard, and why I still, like, try to keep an eye on him and, like, shit on him all the time, is he's starting to make those same noises again about, like, you know, like, we're not going to do this through the ballot box and whatever. And it's all like this subtle, like, oh, we're going to have to. There was one podcast he did recently where somebody was like, well, so you would have to take control of the government, and, like, how are you going to do that? Like, you're never going to get, like, voted into office. And he's like, oh, well, there's other ways to seize the reins of power and whatever. And it's all, like, this subtle push that's still going in, like, this weird, like, brown shirty direction. And it's people's lives are going to continue to get ruined until these people fucking learn their lesson.
brown shirts still won through the ballot box. I mean, like Hitler was elected, you know?
Yeah.
Like, we've made a really good point about a year ago when all this TWP stuff, White Lives Matter stuff was going on, that he made about the TWP, where he was saying, they keep talking about a revolution in the streets. There's never been a successful right-wing revolution in history because revolution is not right-wing.
Yep.
The right wing is about order, and that is not you. There's only a couple of ways in which a right wing group can seize control of the government, and it's going to be through either a military coup or through the government, or through directly, the elections. Yeah, essentially through the elections, through getting up in the parties and then using some sort of party to take control, which is a valid means. They can't, again, outside of a military coup, which is valid, like for instance, Francisco Franco in Spain.
Anything you heard there, Monsieur, you'd like to comment on?
This is a fucking shit show. This is ridiculous. Come on, get it together. Are you kindergartners? Do you need a kindergarten cop?
Okay, this is good. This is a good show. Good job, Sharia LaBeouf.
Spain. Yeah, my tongue just died on me right there. Francisco Franco in Spain, and then with the elections, as with Adolf Hitler in Germany, I don't think you could point to any successful revolution that's been an all right wing. I mean, and that's where it comes down to is people like Richard and even people like TWP are not at all right wing. They don't care about order. They don't care. They're not even really fascists, They're only fascists to the extent that allows them to set up something based around themselves. They're, at the end of the day, tried and true materialists, and so they're not much different than anyone else.
I mean, Richard has said flat outright, I'm a progressive in the truest sense of the word. We cannot look backward. What we must create must be new and revolutionary and all of that. And I mean, look, there's a sense in which he has a point about that. I think it's a bit more of a balance. I think we do need to, I mean, you can't just turn the clock back. As much as I love Ted Kaczynski and his critique of techno capital and everything like that, the idea that you're going to be able to just turn the clock back and become this anarcho-primitivist utopia, and technology is going to even if you could get rid of technology on the world scale, dude, somebody's going to start developing it again.
Any further thoughts, Monsieur?
Yeah, he says Spencer's a progressive at heart, right?
Yeah.
Well, I am a neoliberal at heart, and that means I believe in a functioning state, in state power, and keeping shit together and running things well over, neoliberals run the Democratic Party, or ran the Democratic Party like the squabbling mob it was. You have to keep order. Order is very deeply important to me. In terms of those crappy political compasses, I score 0 left, right, and then really high authoritarian. I'm the natural Hillary voter. I love Hillary. I love iron boots stomping on a face,
Okay, let's get back to Earn What You Deserve, How to Stop Under-Earning, Start Thriving by Gerald Mundus. Okay, take a breath, relax, let it settle in, let yourself feel the truth of it. You have a problem with under-earning. It has caused a lot of pain and trouble in your life. Many people experience a sense of relief when they finally admit this to themselves. Their response is, thank God, now I know what the problem is, which means that I can fix it. Resistance to surrender, which stems from fear, is based largely on a misconception of what the word means. If you're like most people, you interpret surrender as a loss of freedom, defeat, weakness. But one of its primary definitions is surrender means to give up something in favor of something else. It is simply letting go of an old way of doing things to embrace a new way. When you admit that you have a problem with under-earning, when you surrender to that, you become willing to let go of your old perceptions and behaviors, which resulted in deprivation, pressure, and unhappiness. and in their place to embrace new ones which bring about freedom and ease and thriving. So this surrender, paradoxically, is your first triumph. And let me play a little bit more from philosopher Jim Roy on compulsive underearning.
Yes, we call it a terminal vagueness.
Yeah, and it really just keeps you stuck because there's no clarity, there's nothing to aim for, there's no reality to it. So you can live in the fantasy, whatever fantasy you're living out. So the idea of a contract really sounds very powerful.
And it's very clarifying. So it's like, okay, if I don't make enough, then here's what we're going to do. In that case, she was going to go visit her family, which would not be a vacation. And if I didn't make enough the next week, then she was going to stay there, which would definitely not be a vacation. And if I didn't make, and we go right down to, well, supposing a few years go by and I become this hopeless case that never, okay, we'll let you get a divorce. Now neither of us wanted a divorce, but it's like, if we say, okay, let's just think the thing through.
It's brilliant. I think it's brilliant because who wants to talk about that? Most people would rather live in hope. And hope is kind of hopeless in a sense. It doesn't take you anywhere. It could be a starting point, but yeah.
So, Manjura, what happened to your friends from high school? Where are they now in economic terms, professional terms, career terms?
They're generally doing quite well. A few of the people at my high school, I would say, are doing better than me. I especially compare myself to people who followed the aspirational self-actualizing career, and they get paid quite handsomely for it and have already accrued more net worth than me at a younger age. But I think that I picked a very safe route. Also, my not asking for raises is also a pretty safe route. I think that sometimes I need to learn to take more risks.
And I found that worksheet that I was given when I first got a sponsor. So first question I had to answer, how has your compulsive underearning placed you or the lives of others in jeopardy? And so I noted I took crummy living situations, such as with 24 cats, because I could not afford to live better. I lived out of my car for about 6 months in 1994, 1995 as well. It's in a month before I started UCLA in August of 1988. Much of the time between 1988 and 2015, I gave up seeking cures and solutions or just help for my chronic fatigue. I borrowed money from people. I twice bounced a check. I was once a week late with my rent. Another time I was 2 days late. I remember I was driving on board tires in my 1979 Toyota station wagon. This was in early 1996. And it was raining. I was on Canaan Dune Road in Malibu. I was going to rehearse a scene with this really hot actress. And I was so excited. And then I was driving on board tires. I spun out the rain and went right into a power pole and totaled my station wagon. For a couple of years, 1986 to 88, I drove a Volkswagen Bug that had a leaky gasoline tank and smelled of gasoline, which was kind of awkward when I went on dates. I would work extreme hours and then I'd be less alert in my driving. I made a living from writing about the porn industry for a decade. And so when you make money from impure means, it introduces contagion and destruction into your life. I was around shady, dangerous people. I caused great shame to my family, my friends, and my synagogues. On a handful of occasions, these porn people would even come to my home. I got beaten up. I got knocked around. Writing on the porn industry isolated me from other people, from my family, from God. I became known as the porn guy. Certain parts of me just became desensitized. It reduced my ability to move in polite society. I developed a habit of continually making inappropriate sexual references. It became just harder to keep my head up when I walked around in polite society. I just wanted to hide. When I went to shul, I felt like a hooker stepping into a church. When I met people and hit it off, I kept thinking they'd be horrified if they knew how I really made my living. living this double life became normal for me, but it was exhausting. I had a strict religious upbringing, but I would code switch. I would live like a dutiful preacher's kid at home, but as soon as I left the house, I would just switch and do what I like. It's like kids who say come from a traditional Chinese family in America. At home, they may speak Chinese, but as soon as they leave the house, they'll speak perfect English. I had this hero, the Jewish talk show host Dennis Prager, and whenever people got mad at me, they would go to him with their complaints. Well, these people just kept feeling betrayed by me. My parents felt betrayed. Dennis Prager felt betrayed. People who converted me to Judaism felt betrayed. Rabbis felt betrayed. Orthodox Jewish friends felt betrayed. I was a little reckless in things I said and wrote. People hated me for that. They wanted to kill me. So my words made other people feel unsafe and placed them in jeopardy. And I was sued 5 times for libel. I occasionally had unprotected sex. I was promiscuous. Luckily, I never got any STDs. I often made my romantic relationships or sexual relationships or my friendships or just my community my higher power. I would work on my porn book when I was at an office for a respectable job. And of course, I'd constantly get caught at a couple of my jobs. I even showed around this movie I directed in 1996, What Women Want. It's not really a movie to share when you're at a respectable workplace. I kept saying inappropriate things to people at work and at synagogue and in life in general, needlessly alienating people. My crippling narcissism and attention seeking made me very lonely. And I always preferred to stick with what's comfortable because there was so much chaos inside and outside of me. I wanted to stick to what's comfortable and to a very secure routine to avoid stretching myself, and thus I'd live in deprivation. Do you have any thoughts on anything whatsoever, Monsieur?
I gotta go, but
Okay.
I did want to say you've been through a lot, but I feel like to reach the highest heights and to really have a story that compels people and to be a personality, which I think you have to be in order to really hit the top of anything, you have to go through the bottoms and to have these. It's like building your own hero's journey. For that other book, Defining Decade, your 20s, you're building identity capital. You're writing your narrative. My life as a narrative is really, really boring. It's not compelling. And I think that the fact that you're able to talk for hours about your life and it has episodes and a structure that comes to and a redemptive arc, you know, that captures people, that motivates people.
Thanks, man. Good to talk to you. Thanks for coming by the show. Okay, I'm going to go back to this worksheet I was assigned by my sponsor. Have you ever sold yourself short in work and business? And how have you tried to control your compulsive under-earning by switching from job to job, for example, going on public assistance or using credit cards? So here's how I've sold myself short, never asked for a raise, ever earned over 45K in a year, said no to many earning opportunities. I said aloud or to myself, I'm not worth that much money. Part of me has been uncomfortable with prosperity. I've been addicted to creating drama and instability, tend to run myself down, kind of addicted to self-deprecating humor, and I invite people to treat me disrespectfully. Why do you do that? My friends have often asked me. I was afraid of corporate work. I was afraid of working as part of a team, figuring that once people saw me for who I really was, they would not want me around. I've not been a big job switcher. I've always liked routine. Whenever I meet a woman, at least this was my pattern. If I felt that she was out of my league, I wouldn't even try for her. I just give up. Though on the other hand, my last girlfriend said to me, "Why do you always try for women who are out of your league?" The one thing that high achieving women have traditionally said to me as an explanation for why they want to break up: we want different things. So girls with 4K a month Beverly Hills apartments say things like that to me. And I guess I am attracted to successful, high-achieving people, particularly women. On the other hand, it was kind of a relief to slum it with average women, average-looking women. So, In school, I was always keenly conscious of whether or not I was part of the cool crowd. I was kind of in the middle of social status. Sometimes I'd slum it with the losers and I'd date the easy girls rather than striving for a girl I could respect and marry. Okay, next question. What behaviors did your family, friends, or coworkers object to most? My obsessions, such as with sports statistics or with politics or sex, objected to my attention-seeking behavior, boundary-breaking speech, gotten into many needless arguments, needlessly alienated people. I haven't taken other people's feelings and boundaries into sufficient consideration before I speak and act. I kind of got a thrill out of busting people's boundaries. In romantic situations, I'd start out real nice and then over time steadily degrade my partner. Felt like a compulsion beyond my control. Next question. How many times have you tried to stop under-earning and then start again? Well, I got fired from every job I held from 6th through 9th grade because I wasn't really into the work, didn't have much conscientiousness. I've always been into self-help books. Always loved the self-help. Never did much good. I've almost always been solvent, except for 2 times that I maxed out my credit cards, 1994 and 2008 to 2012. I thought that if I lowered myself to writing on the porn industry, I'd make tons of money. But then when I started writing on the porn industry, it just felt too dirty to make much money from it. So I just took the minimum necessary to get by. Okay, let's play a little bit more from this philosopher, Jim Roy, on compulsive under-earning.
You know, they say when hope dies, hopelessness dies. And I think that's exactly what happened for us. And so all of a sudden we set a date, and I can say it was like, you know, the last week of February, somewhere around 22 years ago, because that boy is now 21 going on 22. And we knew how much was enough. It was very well defined, and I had to make it. And, you know, she used to cover, see, but she was not working because she's being a mother.
Right.
So, you know, she couldn't make the difference. She couldn't protect me. She couldn't do anything. So I had to
step up to the plate.
Yeah, I took over the checkbook. I mean, many things that we had to look at the way we perpetuated a dysfunctional system. And, you know, I'll just say it's a very happy story because on that week, for the first time since I met her, I could honestly say I made enough money. Wow. And the next week I made enough, and the next, you know, and I can, you know, like the next 18 years.
So what's the value of doing it a week at a time?
Wow, this host is terrible. Just as he's about to make his point, she'll just interrupt with questions, usually that don't even follow on from what he's been saying. Okay, back to my assignment from my sponsor. Given your history, give a history of your experience with debting and under-earning. So I went to my first debtors meeting in May of 2015. It changed my life, immediately affected the way I thought and spoke and carried myself. My therapist saw a dramatic change. I felt hope, started taking actions to change my life, such as applying for better jobs. I tracked my spending and started listening to these daily phone meetings relating to these 12-step programs for money. Now, my financial situation did not change for another 7 months. I took a new job, kept the old job, started working 40 to 60 hours a week, paid off all my credit card debt. Okay, progression indicates tolerance changes in your mind. Symptoms include your use of under-earning, debting, avoidance of money, larger amounts, switching to stronger toxic thoughts, use for longer periods of time, increased tolerance for under-earning. So things only got desperate for me in years 1995 to 1996 and 2008 to 2012. Other than that, I've had pretty pleasant life. Oh yeah, 6 years in bed, not so pleasant. Okay, vagueness is periods of time that are not registered in the memory of the brain. List 2 examples of times you are aware you have been hiding in the cave. So under-earning is a disease of hiding. So I do not relate to the symptom of time vagueness. I'm very precise about my life history. Name a month in my life and I'll tell you what was going on from about age 5 on. So maybe age 7 on. Hiding in the cave is challenging. So since I started writing on the porn industry in 1995, I Found it tough to hold my head up in public until about 2007 when I quit writing on the porn industry. With my struggles with chronic fatigue, it is hard for me to separate exhaustion from my desire to hide. I'm an Orthodox Jew, so our life is highly communal. That's one reason I converted. There's never been a time in my life where I didn't leave the house for days unless I had the flu or something. So joining lots of different 12-step programs has expanded my life and keeps me busy, keeps me social. Numbing out is under-earning so much that your mind and body shuts down, so you will not consume any more prosperity. List 3 examples of embarrassing times that you numbed out in the cave. While I was bedridden from 1988 to 1994. Aside from that, my life has been pretty exciting. Coming back from chronic fatigue syndrome at age 27, I was hyper-social for my first couple of years after moving to LA. Then I started writing on the porn industry, and I wanted to hide. So on Friday evenings, I'm often exhausted from my week, and sometimes I'll stay home when all around me, my fellow Orthodox Jews are celebrating the Sabbath, singing songs, having big communal meals, and I just want to be left alone, reading a book rather than having a meal with perhaps people that I don't find scintillating. List the 3 most embarrassing or shameful things you've done related to compulsive under-earning. Asking people to borrow money, maxing out my credit cards. I've gone on dates, and when we've met at the restaurant, I've had to admit I had no money. I've lived out of my car, and I once directed a porn movie. So those are pretty embarrassing things. How many crimes have you committed during your compulsive under-earning? How many times have you stolen or taken things on jobs, lied or cheated on the job? Well, not really. I've been lazy on the job. I've chit-chatted on the job. I've never been arrested in my life. I've gotten a few parking tickets and moving violations, and I've been sued 5 times for libel. Preoccupation means looking forward to having a low-paying job, taking work that doesn't serve you, dating or setting yourself up for codependent situations. I have accepted a lot of abuse in my work because I was knocked around a lot as a kid. There's part of me that feels like I deserve to be in an abusive environment, an abusive workplace. Powerlessness can be best defined as times when we did not want to take low-paying work and or tried to limit our usage and were powerless over our addiction and still lost control. Give 5 examples. I don't relate to this question. I've never taken work at below market rates. I worked at a radio station for 3 years for minimum wage, but that was normal for a small radio station and a 19, 20-year-old kid. I interned at a newspaper in my senior year of high school. I can't recall any time I was doing work and was massively underpaid. Made a living from blogging for 10 years, earning between $25,000 and $45,000 a year, but that's pretty normal for blogging. Okay, list all actions, methods, ideas you have taken on your own to solve under-earning. So credit card debt, writing on the porn industry, moving around, asking for help, asking to borrow money, reading self-help books, working extreme hours, converting to Orthodox Judaism, studying economics, dating rich women, befriending rich people, and asking them for their secrets. So I had chronic fatigue syndrome until late 1993 when I was prescribed this drug called Nardil. And according to Wikipedia, Nardil is used primarily in the treatment of major depressive disorder. Patients with depressive symptomology characterized as atypical, non-endogenous, and/or neurotic respond particularly well to Nardil. The medication is also useful in patients who do not respond favorably to first and second line treatments for depression or are treatment resistant. In addition to being a recognized treatment for major depressive disorder, Nardil is effective in treating dysthymia, that's chronic low-grade depression, bipolar depression, panic disorder, social anxiety disorder, bulimia, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, how long have I been under-earning? Pretty much all of my life. Unmanageability. Under-earning has not allowed me to date the type of quality women I would like to date. I like high-achieving women, formidable women, women who've got their lives together, but they never stay with me for long. And when we are together, I'm very one down in the relationship. My under-earning has limited my ability to develop friends. It has saddened and annoyed them. I couldn't socialize like a normal person because I was a broke. And I've often lacked the kind of work that allows a bloke to feel good about himself. Had more than my share of car accidents caused by my own carelessness. I paid twice as much for car insurance for years because of some careless traffic tickets that I got. I put way too much weight on being a good lover because I was failing in other areas of my life. I'd put all this emphasis on my sex life as an escape, kept seeking like ever more extreme and intense sex, and I was sexualizing my stress and my strain and my failure and my anger, trying to work out all my unwanted feelings through sex. I was on the prowl, wasting energy, disrupting social situations. I couldn't sustain my spiritual and religious commitments and connections because of my obsessive sexual thoughts and my chronic underearning. Has your addiction affected your ability to identify and express your your feelings? It's made me sociopathic. It deadened me. It put me in a downward spiral. I didn't know how to escape. It made me desperate and unstable. What personality changes did you experience as a result of underearning? I felt small, frightened, desperate, isolated, defeated, sick, tired, weak, yearning to check out of my situation through some kind of escape or fantasy or fix. How much time have you wasted because of underearning? Well, had bouts of porn addiction, had bouts of sports addiction, Netflix addiction. Oh. What are defense mechanisms I use to deal with my underearning? I'll say, oh, I'll use this for my writing. That's what I kept saying to myself when I was living out of my car. I'll just use this for my writing one day. And if I can just get out of this one problem, I'll be fine. Or rescue's coming at any moment now. I'll check my email. My problem will be solved. Hollywood will come knocking on my door. They want my story. Just a small break from success. I'm just like a tweak away from living a good life. I'm just a small change away from making it. I'm headed for great things. Or I'd get depressed and say, I'm effed. For years, that was the most common thing that I said to myself from about 2006 until 2009. I'd count on other people to rescue me. Okay. How do my character defects make me feel? My selfishness, self-centeredness, inconsideration, dishonesty, and fearfulness, they all make me feel smaller, tighter, more constricted. The more expansive I feel, the more love and generosity I feel. When I feel selfish and self-seeking, I feel myself kind of narrowed down around what I want as I try to impose my will on others and I fear getting caught. When I'm dishonest, my stomach feels queasy and tightens up as I kind of push my anxiety down into my stomach. When I'm in fear, I feel small and tight and compressed and uneasy. Warren Buffett says that when he thinks about a particular stock and it makes his back hurt, he sells that stock. So I don't feel at ease in the universe when I'm in my character defects. Okay, let's play a little bit more from the philosopher Jim Roy talking here about compulsive underearning.
I know in, let's say, Alcoholics Anonymous, it's a day at a time. So what's the value of actually choosing to deal with it a week at a time? Or
well, I just because say people think you got your paychecks a week at a time. It's just a measurable unit. Could have been done a month, but it was much more. Oh, wait a minute! And I began thinking I knew how many appointments I needed a week. I began tuning into what
it would take.
Yeah, what it would exactly take, and I would almost say as soon as I could truly say and be with all those elements, it began happening. And it didn't happen like then I figured it out. I always kind of knew, although I had to let go of the mansion in the Hamptons fantasy and, also let go of the despondency. You're like, no, come on, like here, this is it. Something real is possible. And I can, accomplish that. And I said, you can say, well, I did pick up the phone and I did call some numbers, but you know what? Also, the phone began to ring. And I always say, like, I don't bother to explain my miracles too much because, I think it's more useful to realize there are miracles. You say, when you get committed, then providence opens itself up and things begin to happen that they were not happening.
I want to ask you about the compulsive aspect of it. because, people can explain under earning on an individual basis, circumstantially, but there's...
Okay, let's look at the financialunderearnersanonymous.org website. The 12 tools of Financial Underearners Anonymous. 1, a job. Getting and maintaining a job or other source of steady income is critical to our long-term prosperity. A job is a tool for earning. Through having a job, we develop our spiritual work ethic, give service to the world, and we channel our earning power, creating both active and passive streams of income. 2, earning plan. Developing and following an earning plan is essential to increase our earning. Our earning plan is organized into income-generating categories. We invite, celebrate, and record all income flowing into our lives. 3, 4 quarters. It is a simple tool for tracking and managing our categories for income, spending, debt repayment, and savings. The 4 quarters worksheet lets us compare our income to our expenses, thus measuring our cash flow. It also lets us compare our debts to our savings and wealth, thus measuring our net worth. If our cash flow is negative, we are under-earning. If our cash flow is positive, we are prospering. Looking at the numbers allows us to determine whether or not we are recovering from financial under-earning. 4, trajectory. Made of a 1-year, 3-year, and 5-year strategic action plan for developing our income, increasing our earning power, and helping us to manifest our goals, larger vision, or purpose in life. 5, pressure relief groups or meetings, action meetings, prosperity teams. We organize and participate in small groups or teams with other recovering members to support each other and to increase our earning power while giving and receiving service. We realize that recovery is a team sport. We use these teams and small groups to help us get a job if needed, to develop our earning plan, to use the 4 quarters, and to plan out our trajectories. 6, action partners and sponsorship. We reach out to other recovering members to ask for accountability, support, and guidance with working the 12 steps and using the tools of Financial Underearners Anonymous. We ask someone who has what we want to be our sponsor. This person guides us through the recovery process. 7, recovery literature. We read and study 12-step literature to learn and apply the best practices to our own financial recovery. 8, telephone and internet. We use all forms of communication to expand and support our financial recovery, to connect with other financial UA members by way of outreach, and to interview more experienced members, asking them for their experience, strength, and hope. Meetings. We attend meetings to connect with other recovering members. We share our experience, strength, and hope, learning and applying the best practices within the recovery community. 10, the 12 steps. We work the 12 steps of financial UA to help us connect with an earning power greater than ourselves, which can restore us to prosperity and to channel this healing spiritual energy into all areas of our lives. 11, service. We give and receive service within the Fellowship of Financial UA by participating in pressure relief groups, action meetings, prosperity teams, sponsorship, and by helping to organize and run meetings. We give service to the world by holding a job and developing a spiritual work ethic. 12, anonymity. We practice anonymity by putting principles before personalities, maintaining levels of privacy and confidentiality among the members, and knowing that it is a loving and greater earning power that is the source of our abundance and recovery. Now, the 5 prosperity tools of UA: interviews, vision board, treasure map, envelopes and note cards, money, energy, and happiness inventory. Wow. Okay, then we've got step work. Okay, and there are a lot of audio files for that. We've got the 12 steps of Financial Underearners Anonymous. We admitted we were powerless around earning, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that an earning power greater than ourselves could restore us to prosperity. 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of an earning power as we understood it. 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, we admitted to earning power to ourselves and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we were entirely ready to have earning power remove all these defects of character. 7, we humbly asked earning power to remove our shortcomings. 8, we made a list of all persons we had harmed, became willing to make amends to them all. 9, we made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, we continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with our earning power, praying only for knowledge of its will for us and the earning power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other financial underearners and to practice these principles in all areas of our lives. Let's go back to philosopher Jim Roy here talking about compulsive underearning.
Something you're talking about that's really underneath that causes compulsive underearning.
Yeah.
So say something about that.
Well, that's another thing that we need to examine. So we usually think, we think like we're thinking, we think we're the thinker, and, that we kind of live a life at the level of those thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
But this is just like, like when people are on a diet, they've been on the diet all day, and then at the end of the day, just when they get done congratulating themselves, they go to the cupboard and get the box of cereal or go get the ice cream or whatever they're going to do. Something, and I'm just going to speak of it as like something instinctual, something animalistic, something willful and compulsive, right? At a much deeper level than those thoughts that we live in, is operating us, and it guides us, and it's much brighter than we are, and it's got access to everything we know plus. So, we're really no match on a, one-on-one, we're not going to just think our way through this and overdo it. This is really going to humble our, I think of it now as our, ego self.
Sure, our vision of who we think we are.
Yeah. But I know with all the mortgage crises going on, the banking crises, the unrest, and the simple fact that it really doesn't matter how much you make. I know this now from speaking to millionaires who were definitely suffering from under-earning, that because it's not a matter of fact. Like myself, I always imagine talking to some guy in Afghanistan about my poverty or, my hard time. I mean, they'd crack up laughing if they didn't just scoff at me. So,
or slap you.
Yeah, exactly. So these things aren't literally matters of fact. They're matters of our
underlying
experience.
belief system.
Exactly.
We have about 3 minutes left, and I just want to point to that because what you point to in the conversation about the millionaire who still perceives himself as an under-earner, anybody looking from the outside would go, well, he's insane. But it seems to me that what you're saying is follow the suffering to get access to what's driving the show. Because if you're a millionaire and you're still suffering and feeling in survival mode and scarcity, then there's something bigger going on than the
Okay, I can take your calls now. I've activated the phone number. So the phone number is 310-997-4596. You can call in now, be part of the show. I'll just paste the number there in the chat and talk about anything. It doesn't have to be about money, under-earning, debting. Talk about anything you want. And meanwhile, while I wait for the calls to come in, I'll read from Earn What You Deserve by Gerald Mundis, How to Stop Under-Earning, Start Thriving. It's really the unofficial textbook of Under-Earners Anonymous, Financial Under-Earners Anonymous, and Debtors Anonymous. Denial is the refusal to admit that you have a problem. It is an attempt to rationalize or justify your under-earning. Denial is a wholly natural reaction. It is also a dangerous one. If you buy it, you're not going to have much success in ever bringing enough money to meet your needs in a humane way. Denial is nearly universal at first. After all, no one wants to have an under-earning problem. You tell yourself it's your parents' fault, it's the government's fault, it's your wife's fault, it's the economy's fault, the patriarchy's fault. Actually, your understanding isn't your fault, not in the sense that you are flawed or you did something wrong, you didn't plan this, you didn't deliberately set out to put yourself in this position. There's no blame here. It's not intentional. So resistance to the idea of being an under-earner, especially a chronic or compulsive under-earner, is quite reasonable. It would seem at first glance that if I am a compulsive under-earner, then I am condemned to continue under-earning completely. compulsively for the rest of my life. That is no more true than it is to admit that one is an alcoholic condemns one to go on drinking for the rest of one's life. Just the opposite. By admitting you're an alcoholic, you can begin to free yourself from the need to drink. And you can call in now, 310-997-4596. Sometimes, too, there is an element of superstitious thinking in denial, a fear that to call oneself an under-earner will be to create the reality. That to use a demon's name is to summon the demon up. Psychologically, there's a grain of truth in this. Fact remains that if one is an under-earner, then no amount of denying it is ever going to change the reality. Indeed, it will only worsen the condition. Okay, to combat denial, one, freely admit it's there. Tell yourself that, of course, you'd rather not be an under-earner who would. Recognize the personal preference doesn't change the facts. Much rather be 6'2" and have a full head of hair again, but I'm not, and I don't. I have preferences. They don't change the facts. Remember, you're not unique. Having this problem doesn't place you in a tiny minority. Drive home to yourself that surrender doesn't sentence yourself to life of poverty and difficulty. And it's just like any other phone call to the US. So people saying, how can I call this number? I'm in Australia. Well, it's just like any other phone call to the US. There's a prefix. I think it's 044, blah, blah, blah. So whatever, figure it out or don't figure it out. Proceed as if you didn't have any denial. Don't let it sidetrack you from your purpose. Denial is simply that, denial. It can't force you to do anything. You can go right ahead with this program, decide its presence in time. With repeated constructive action, its grip will lessen. Sometimes denial goes dormant a while, only to pop up again later. Often appears after you have begun to reverse your situation and the stress is easing, or with a large influx of money from whatever the source. That old attitudes and behavior patterns don't die so easily. Let's go back here to Jim Roy. Philosopher.
Yeah. And it's great. I love when you say follow the suffering, because that's what's going to get us beneath that level of, we think if we put more money in the bank or something like that, we'd be handled, and that will not do it at all. So, to just like, if we could just get it said today, look, some of you have identified with what I said. Some of you might be identifying while saying, I'm glad I'm not like him. But I've talked to many of you, so I'm kind of like, I'm outed.
Okay, I've got more from that show that I played earlier. We live in a society. There's Simon talking about Matt Heimbach and the Traditionalist Workers' Party. So let me forward to that.
You would respect it. Okay, either.
I remember Mike on there for like half an hour.
There's Sharia LaBeouf talking to Simon, Joe the Boomer and company.
Like, I was never buddy with them and whatever. It's like, dude, I've seen videos of you like throwing Romans and like doing all this pagan shit with them at some rally after party. And like the pictures of him like all buddy with Heimbach and like going on each other's shows and stuff like that. Like, dude, these people were like so arms open to like this hardcore, like literal neo-Nazi, like just weirdos that just like turn everybody off.
Yeah.
And just welcomed them with open arms.
Not to defend Mike Enoch. That's never my intention. He has me blocked. But I kind of understand where, the Heimbach thing is such a weird phenomenon to me, because TWP, it really is the fault of people like Mike Enoch and Richard Spencer that so many people were exposed to Heimbach and fell into a lot of his traps, because I'm going to give it to the guy. He had a very good way of speaking. Like, I didn't really know much about him. I heard him on podcasts. I didn't know what he was really about.
Yeah, no, he had a certain eloquence and charisma about him. He could give a good speech and present a good argument and stuff like that.
And the stuff he was saying was, I think I found myself agreeing with some of the things that Heimbach was saying, a lot more than the things that Mike Enoch was saying. Like, he had certain ideas that were, I would say, more Christian. Again, we know how that turned out eventually. And like I remember being at Charlotte, and I'm like, oh wow, Heimbach's here. He's pretty cool. Isn't he that guy from that podcast? He said some cool stuff. Like not even knowing the insanity that that guy was involved with. And fast forward early 2018 or mid 2018, somewhere in there, I was giving a guy from TWP a ride in my car. He wanted to be picked up to a friend of mine was doing a little bit of an alt-right hangout, and so he was on the way. So I picked him up, and I remember talking with this guy, and he was younger than me. He was like 19, I believe, fully in the TWP. Just like a week before I came to pick him up and drive him to my friend's place, he'd gotten a TWP tattoo. He got a TWP.
Oh, I remember you telling me this story. Yeah,
he got a TWP swastika tattoo, like over his heart. And he thought he was so hardcore. This poor guy, he looks pretty nerdy too. He had kind of like a bowl cut for a while. He had and then I think he had I don't know, he was all over the place with hairstyle, and he had everyone kind of made fun of him. But it's like this poor kid. And the week after he gets the swastika TWP tattoo, the
cup box, yeah.
Yep. And then the whole organization disbands, and here he is with a giant TWP tattoo over his heart, and he's like, well, I guess I gotta, the organization's gone, but I gotta keep fighting. He's so deep. And I remember
you gotta fight your way to making 10 grand to get that thing lasered off of your chest, bro. It's the only fight you gotta do.
Massive amounts of coke there.
Yeah,
I was actually surprised, Simon. I was surprised that the first thing you didn't jump to, having listened to that clip, being when Richard was talking about and of course I'm not talking about going out for a glass of wine with your girlfriend or your wife or whatever, but public drinking and whatever. You pour alcohol on one of these, and it's like pouring gasoline on a fire and whatever. Mm-hmm. And I'm just sitting here thinking about you literally cleaning up Mike Enoch's vomit out of a vehicle.
Yeah. Talking about they were like, oh, let's go to Waffen House. Oh, let's go right wing SS Waffen House. Let's go to Waffen House at 3 a.m. And he was trying to get everyone to do shots before going, and Mike Enoch offered me a shot. I'm like, no, because I wasn't drinking. Because I don't drink often, and I'm definitely.
Okay, that's from the terrific show We Live in a Society, Season 2, Episode 93, Wignat's Gonna Wignat by Sharia LaBeouf. Okay, be back later today, I believe. Until then, bye-bye.